Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the What If guy, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Issei used the power of Hamon. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Flashback. A group of 4 cheerful brown-haired children left school, with the eldest viewing the youngest as a nuisance. One of them, Ken, who followed Issei, noticed Ryu's troubled expression and asked what was wrong. Izari, the eldest sister, also spoke up, reminding Ryu that he could count on them as family. Ryu, feeling embarrassed, insisted that nothing was wrong. As the days passed, a year went by until 2 girls arrived, one with red hair and the other with black. Rias Gremory and Sona Citri sensed the auras of the 3 brown-haired boys, paying little attention to the youngest among them. At that time, Ryu and Izari were both 6 years old, while Ken and Issei were 5. Rias and Sona began their usual conversation about believing in the supernatural, revealing that Ryu possessed the boosted gear. They were surprised to learn that Izari had the dragon Tiamat, and then they discovered that Ken had a sacred gear called Yami, a powerful sword. Rias and Sona decided that Ryu and Ken would join the Gremory faction, while Izari would join Citri. Just then the 5-year-old Issei interrupted, excitedly asking what sacred gear he had. Rias responded coldly, stating that he did not possess a sacred gear. This caused Issei's excitement to fade, replaced by a look of despair. The others laughed at him and he retreated to his room, feeling dejected. From that day on, Issei was treated as a nuisance and sometimes as a punching bag, enduring this suffering day and night. This treatment led him to develop a shy personality that made it difficult for him to make friends. Even when he managed to get along with someone, his siblings would tarnish his reputation, labeling him a pervert, alongside his 2 only friends, Matsuda and Motohama. And a flashback. Now Issei lay on the ground, feeling defeated. An adult brown-haired man entered the scene, addressing the group and announcing that it was time to eat. Everyone nodded, leaving the youngest boy lying in a pool of his own blood as they mocked him. Issei vowed that one day he would make them pay for their disdain and that everyone would bow before him, the great Issei. In a moment of anger, he collapsed, losing consciousness and finding himself in a blank space. Issei wondered where he was when he heard a mocking laugh echoing around him. He demanded to know who was there, challenging the presence to show itself. A shadow responded, revealing a blonde figure holding a box. Issei asked who he was. The figure introduced himself as Dio, almost shouting his name, adding that for Issei he could be called Dio-sama, with a characteristic mocking tone. Dio then told Issei that he had seen how life had treated him and asked if he would like to rise above everyone else, making them plead on their knees. He offered to guide Issei to the system that governs all existence. Issei, intrigued, asked what this system was. Dio replied simply, "Power?" The blonde smiled, leaving the brown-haired boy deep in thought. Issei hesitated, unsure of his words. Dio nodded in agreement. A bright light began to emanate from the small brown-haired boy's body. Confused and frightened, he wondered what was happening to him. Dio explained that he was leaving his consciousness. Issei was surprised to learn that this was his consciousness, as no one had ever told him before. He hurriedly asked how he could return and how he would communicate his decision. Dio calmly instructed him to concentrate, assuring him that he would bring him back if necessary. Issei agreed and vanished from his consciousness. The next day he was lost in thought about Dio's proposal. He was leaning towards rejecting it, feeling he wasn't in such bad shape despite what Dio had said. However, the final straw came when he overheard his parents and siblings, along with the Gremory and Citri families, devising a plan to eliminate him. The eldest brother, Ryu, had risen early to carry out the plan to rid themselves of the nuisance. Ryu approached Issei with a malicious smile, asking where he was rushing off to. Issei, with a serious expression that betrayed his sadness, responded sharply. Ryu's ego was bruised by Issei's tone, and he angrily threw a punch that sent Issei crashing through the door and into the yard. Struggling, Issei managed to evade another punch aimed at him. Ryu taunted him, confident and mocking. Soon their siblings and parents joined them. The father, with an authoritative tone, questioned the commotion. Ryu dismissed it, claiming he was just dealing with the nuisance resisting him. The father, smiling, encouraged Ryu to finish it quickly. Ryu turned back to Issei, who glared at him. He urged his younger brother to have some fun, launching himself at Issei, who barely dodged the blow. Ryu remarked that Issei wasn't as weak as he thought, signaling for their other siblings to join the fray. Ken scoffed, declaring it would be too easy. Izari suggested they call Rias and Sona to enjoy the spectacle while they had fun with Issei. The father agreed, stating it wouldn't be fair if only they had fun. All eyes turned to Issei as they charged at him. After a while of being beaten, the two heirs of their clans arrived. Rias expressed her disappointment, wishing to hear more of Issei's cries. Sona echoed her sentiment, lamenting the lack of excitement. They approached Issei's weakened body, kicking and laughing at him, while he felt a surge of helplessness. In Issei's mental space, Dio spoke up, asking if he wanted help to turn the tables on them. Issei eagerly agreed, wishing to stomp on them like the pests they were. Dio smiled at his enthusiasm. Outside of Issei's mental space, he stood up, unscathed, laughing maniacally as the scene unfolded. Imagining that Dio is in Issei's body and Ryu is Kekujin, the emerald splash is the dragon shot, and there's no budget for edits. Everyone, without exception, was astonished at how Issei seemed to move with incredible speed to dodge and counterattack Ryu. Ryu fell unconscious under Issei's Dio's mocking gaze. Izumi questioned what Issei had done, and Issei responded that he had merely taught that insect a lesson about interfering with the plans of a superior being. Before anyone could utter a word, Issei vanished from sight, leaving everyone in shock at what they had just witnessed. Meanwhile, Issei had regained control of his body, wearing a slightly mischievous smile as he headed toward a forest where, as suggested by Dio, they would train for some time. Dio then spoke, asking Issei how he felt about the beating he had given to his arrogant brother. Issei acknowledged that it was a well-deserved thrashing. Dio remarked that Ryu's words were empty and lacked any backing. He then shifted the topic to their training, suggesting that Issei first create a refuge to protect himself. Issei, curious, asked why Dio was doing all this for him. Dio explained that, despite what Issei might believe, he was destined for greatness, and his life reminded Dio of his own childhood. Issei expressed his gratitude, and Dio insisted that Issei should call him simply Dio, feeling honored to be addressed in such a way. Issei complied, but then inquired about the golden being that had appeared to protect them. Dio explained that it was a stand, the physical manifestation of the soul. Dio elaborated on what a stand is, how to obtain one, and the various types. He informed Issei that since Dio was now part of him, they would share the same stand and its abilities. Issei was eager to know what the world's ability was, and Dio revealed that it could stop time. Issei was amazed by this power, realizing they could rise above everyone else. Dio added that the world could reach a higher potential known as heaven, which excited him. Issei, confused, asked for clarification. Dio explained that heaven was the ultimate evolution of his stand, achievable through a specific ritual. Before that ritual, however, they needed to unlock the maximum capabilities of the world in its current state, which was the purpose of their training. Issei was eager to begin, and Dio instructed him to start building their refuge so they could commence their training, which would last 10 years. The training was intense, pushing Issei to his physical limits to harness the main ability of the world. The training categories were as follows. 1 to 2 years, he trained rigorously to enhance his physical abilities. 3 to 4 years, he focused on mental training to ensure the world would not go out of control. 5 to 6 years, he practiced with his stand, striking trees and other materials to avoid relying solely on it. 7 to 8 years, he trained the world's time-stopping ability, eventually being able to freeze time for 30 minutes. 9 to 10 years, Dio provided Issei with advanced combat training and introduced him to Hamon, which could amplify both his physical abilities and those of the world. After the training period, Issei, now with blonde tips that were gradually becoming more pronounced due to Dio's soul merging with his, felt it was time to execute their plan to reach heaven. Dio indicated that this would be their farewell, as his time was running short. He had taught Issei the essentials and the steps to reach heaven. Issei shed a few tears as he acknowledged Dio's words. Dio reassured him not to be sad, emphasizing the importance of their goal and expressing that Issei was more than just a person to him. He considered him like a son. These words struck Issei deeply, causing him to cry openly. In a moment of vulnerability, Issei called Dio father, and Dio, touched, allowed a tear to fall as he smiled at Issei, merging completely with his soul as he faded into particles of light. His last words were a declaration of pride in Issei. Issei vowed to make Dio proud as he prepared to return to Kuo, feeling a mix of determination and annoyance at the thought of returning to that place. Now, a handsome blonde was searching for an apartment in Kuo. Using the world, he had borrowed a few wallets from high society, which led him to a house with a for sale sign. Issei thought it looked suitable for living in the meantime as he marked the number on the sign. The seller answered the phone and the story continued from there. Issei was seated, waiting for the seller to arrive when he heard a feminine voice. The seller greeted him with a slight blush, captivated by his appearance. Issei responded with a casual wave, noticing her distraction. The seller quickly apologized and suggested they proceed to view the house. As they entered, Issei remarked on the house's good condition and inquired about payment methods. The seller mentioned that payment could be made by card. Issei humorously pulled out a card, pretending it belonged to a millionaire. The seller nodded and went to prepare the paperwork, while Issei simply acknowledged her with a nod. After some time the paperwork was completed. The seller informed Issei that the property was now in his name and advised him to take good care of it before departing. Issei, feeling tired, decided to organize everything in his new home. Once settled, he contemplated which academy to attend and ultimately chose Kuo Academy, as it was the closest to his new residence. He resolved to complete the necessary paperwork promptly, as he didn't want to be left uninformed and vulnerable to manipulation, a trait he shared with Dio. Neither of them enjoyed taking orders. The next day, Issei woke up early to fill out the enrollment forms. Upon arriving at the academy, he noticed the attention he attracted from the female students, while the male students glared at him, feeling threatened by the new competition. As he reached the principal's office, he recognized Sona Citri, who was taken aback by his presence. Issei introduced himself and stated his purpose for visiting. Sona, surprised by his name, wished him luck with the paperwork. After knocking on the principal's door, Issei entered and presented his enrollment request. The principal checked his documents and administered a test to assess his academic level, ensuring he wasn't just another student taking up space. After successfully completing the test, the principal welcomed him to Kuo Academy, which would begin the following day. As Issei left the office, he noticed a group of 3 brown-haired students passing by. He shot them a piercing glance, but they didn't seem to notice him. Ken, one of the students, remarked to his friends about how familiar Issei looked, but Ryu dismissed it, suggesting he was just another nobody. Meanwhile, Issei took a moment to rest after the paperwork, expressing his frustration with the process. He was relieved to have identified one of his 2 targets for his plan. With that, he closed his eyes to recharge, knowing the next day would be demanding. The following morning, Issei arrived at the academy, dressed in his uniform. He knocked on the door of classroom 1A, where the teacher welcomed him. After presenting his papers, the teacher instructed him to wait until called to introduce himself. Once the class was quiet, the teacher announced the new student, causing excitement among the girls and apprehension among the boys, who hoped he wouldn't be the handsome guy they had seen before. When Issei entered the classroom, the girls erupted in cheers, while the boys remained silent, intimidated by his presence. He introduced himself, and the girls bombarded him with questions about his relationship status. Issei chose to sit next to a blonde girl named Asia, who greeted him warmly. After classes, as Issei was leaving, he accidentally bumped into Ken, who appeared annoyed. Ken scolded him for not watching where he was going, and Issei was taken aback by Ken's resemblance to his younger brother. Ken, dismissing the encounter, mentioned that Issei reminded him of a past annoyance before walking away. Issei returned home in silence, frustrated with Ken's family. Meanwhile, in the occult research club, Rias was busy with paperwork while Ryu Hyoudou kept her company. Suddenly, Ken burst in looking as if he had seen a ghost. Rias inquired about his distress, and Ken revealed that he had seen Issei, confirming Rias's recognition of the name. Ryu decided to speak up, asserting that both he and Aquino knew the truth about the obstacle that had been missing. He would bet everything he had that it was now 3 meters underground. Aquino then chimed in, suggesting that they could clarify who Issei was. Rias explained that Issei was an old acquaintance who had vanished 10 years ago, leaving most people in shock. Asia then recalled that a new classmate had joined them that day and his name was Issei, but with the notable difference that his last name was not Hyoudou but Brando. This revelation left everyone present in shock, as it was quite a coincidence. Rias instructed Kiba to bring Issei to her office the next morning. Kiba nodded in agreement, and everyone went home to rest, leaving 3 brown-haired individuals deep in thought. Ken had shared everything with Izari on their way home. The next day, a blonde boy was surrounded by girls in his classroom, who bombarded him with questions. However, he ignored them, only engaging with his friends Matsuda and Motohama. Issei remarked to his friends that it had been a while since they last met. Matsuda, confused, questioned who he was, while Motohama found him familiar but couldn't place him. Issei then revealed a secret code that surprised both of them, leading them to realize he was indeed their old friend. They were incredulous that one of the academy's princes was their old companion. Issei teased them about reforming their old trio of mischief makers. Excitedly they agreed to join him. Issei planned to enjoy his break but noticed Kiba approaching, the other prince of the academy, who informed him that Rias requested his presence in her office. Issei accepted this without protest, and they headed to the occult club. Upon arriving, Kiba knocked on the door and was granted entry. He announced Issei's arrival as per Rias's orders. Rias thanked Kiba and acknowledged Issei, who nodded in response. However, she noticed a hint of nostalgia and resentment in Issei's gaze directed at a group of brown-haired students. Before she could speak, one of them, Ken, recognized Issei and noted that his aura was unmistakable. Issei confirmed his identity, remarking that they were not as useless as he had thought. This comment angered Ryu, another brown-haired student, who shouted at him. Issei responded coolly, suggesting that they were merely obstacles in his path, a sentiment he had expressed during their last encounter. Ryu insisted that his previous victory was due to luck and claimed to have grown stronger since then. Issei dismissed him, stating that he was still the same weak opponent, lamenting the wasted potential of his power. Ryu was taken aback, realizing that Issei had accurately identified his limits. He retorted that he had enough power to bring Issei to his knees. Just as Issei was about to reply, Sona Citri entered with her entourage. Sona questioned the situation, and Rias reminded her of Issei's return. Sona acknowledged this but wanted to know his whereabouts. Issei, feeling cheeky, announced his presence, prompting Saji to challenge him for speaking to the president in such a manner. Sona dismissed Saji's concern, telling him it wasn't worth it, which made Issei chuckle at the absurdity of the situation. It was a beautiful day for a family of brown-haired individuals, including a father and mother, except for the youngest brown-haired son, Hyoudou Issei. He was in his old room, filled with worn-out furniture, including a very old bed and a desk with a lamp on it. Issei lay on his bed, covering one eye with an ice pack, wondering to himself why he was being treated this way. Tears streamed down his face as he questioned what he had done to deserve such treatment. At that moment, the door opened, revealing his older brother, Ryusaki Hyoudou, or Ryu for short. Ryu stood there with a mischievous smile, telling Issei that they were waiting for him outside. Issei, frustrated, questioned why they were treating him this way. Ryu responded mockingly, saying that Issei was useless in battle and for anything else. The others present felt a mix of fear and confusion at Issei's demeanor. Ryu, dismissing Issei's bravado, declared that he would defeat him. As Ryu charged at Issei, a humanoid figure appeared behind Issei, delivering a powerful blow to Ryu's stomach, causing him to stagger back. Issei, embodying Dio, proclaimed that the others were mere insects trying to rise against him. Ryu, angered, dismissed the attack as luck and prepared to charge at Issei again, flanked by his brothers. They attempted to strike from different angles, but an unseen force blocked their attacks. Dio's stand, the world, which remained hidden from view. Issei taunted them, noting their inability to land a hit. Rias, observing the scene, wondered what had happened to the Issei she knew, who had been completely useless just days before. Ryu, undeterred, charged up a dragon shot, determined to finish Issei off, despite Drake's concerns about the consequences of attacking his brother. Ryu unleashed the dragon shot, but Issei laughed, revealing that his power, the world, allowed him to dominate everything. This revelation shocked everyone present, though Ryu dismissed it as mere boasting. Issei then activated his stand, manifesting a humanoid figure with gray and golden skin just as the dragon shot was about to collide with him. In an instant, Ryu was sent flying without explanation. Saji, confused, questioned Issei's laughter. Issei remarked that it was amusing to see the owner protecting his pets, drawing anger from those around him. Izari joined the conversation, expressing disbelief at Issei's transformation from the sweet boy he once was. Issei explained that he had changed for the better, much to the shock of those who remembered his former self. Rias, intrigued, offered Issei a place in her entourage, promising fame, power, and wealth. Sona, annoyed, chimed in that the same offer applied to her group. Issei, uninterested, stated that he would rather join any other demonic house than theirs, which hurt Ryu's pride. Ryu challenged Issei to a one-on-one fight, stating that if he won Issei would have to obey the president's orders. Issei found the challenge interesting and asked what would happen if he won. Rias quickly agreed that if Issei won, they would leave him alone. Issei accepted the challenge with enthusiasm. As the bell rang, signaling the end of classes, Issei apologized to the others, explaining that this was a matter between him and his brothers. After class, the trio of perverts gathered behind the kendo club, where Issei revealed that he hadn't brought them there to reform their ways but to give them a gift for their loyalty. Matsuda eagerly asked what the gift was. Issei reminded them of the anime they had watched about a guy with a watch that could stop time. The other two perverts were puzzled until Issei shouted, "Ziwarudo." Time seemed to stand still with only Issei moving. He approached the duo of perverts who were slowly unfrozen, their expressions reflecting shock and disbelief. Matsuda looked at Issei, confused about what was happening. Issei explained that he had a power similar to that of an anime, capable of stopping time for 30 minutes. He found it amusing to think of time as being paused. The excitement in Matsuda and Motohama's eyes was palpable, as they never imagined such an opportunity would arise. Issei then announced that they had 25 minutes to enjoy themselves, but they needed to stay focused on their goal, the kendo club. With a special technique, Issei could amplify his abilities and extend his time stop to an hour, which was quite impressive. The two friends were filled with enthusiasm, eager to seize the moment. However, Issei made them promise to refrain from being overly perverted. After arriving at the changing room, they indulged in their brief adventure, enjoying the thrill of the moment. Time flew by, and soon Issei reminded them that it was time to leave before they were discovered. Matsuda and Motohama left feeling exhilarated. Just before departing, Matsuda playfully swatted his captain, claiming it was for all the time she had scolded them. As they distanced themselves, the time stop ended, and a loud scream echoed from the kendo club members, startling Matsuda and Motohama. They were amazed that it had all been real, still unsure if they were dreaming. Issei announced it was time for him to leave. Matsuda and Motohama expressed their gratitude, wishing him luck as they hurried home, vowing never to wash their hands again. Meanwhile, in the academy courtyard, two followers awaited their master, a certain blonde. Ryu, tired of waiting, expressed his frustration, believing it was a waste of time to wait for someone he deemed insignificant. Just as he turned to leave, he felt a chilling presence behind him. Issei had appeared. Ryu confronted Issei, who simply smiled, unfazed by Ryu's bravado. Ryu, eager to prove himself, launched an attack, but Issei effortlessly dodged, his confidence growing as he laughed lightly at Ryu's frustration. Suddenly, a voice emanated from Ryu's gear, announcing a power boost, and Ryu charged at Issei with renewed vigor. Despite Ryu's enhanced strength, Issei continued to evade his attacks with ease, leaving everyone astonished. Ken remarked on Issei's skill, while Izari expressed her disbelief at how Issei was handling the situation. Ryu, growing increasingly frustrated, demanded Issei to stand still so he could land a hit. Issei, unimpressed, remarked on Ryu's pathetic attempts, even feeling a twinge of pity for him. The realization struck everyone. If Issei chose to join any faction, he would be unstoppable. Fed up with Ryu's antics, Issei decided it was time to end the confrontation and return home to rest. An aura of yellow energy surrounded him as he prepared to unleash his attack, letting out a battle cry as he declared his move. At that moment, the three brown-haired individuals were sent flying, unconscious, just like Ryu had been once. The rest of the group was astonished at how, in an instant, he had dispersed the attack and sent his brothers soaring, leaving everyone speechless. Issei thought to himself that the fight was over. Kaneko confirmed that the seniors were out of the match, declaring Issei Brando the winner. As Issei left, everyone remained incredulous at what they had just witnessed. We find Issei resting in bed, but he suddenly jumped up, realizing he had forgotten it was Wednesday and he needed to attend class. He cursed under his breath, checking his watch, and was shocked to see he had only 10 minutes left. He had used his ability, the world, so much that it had exhausted him. The upside was that he could now extend it by 1 minute, bringing his limit to 31 minutes. Issei thought quickly and decided to invoke the world to stop time, allowing him to organize himself and leave his house while time was frozen. Once he felt he was nearing his limit, he slipped into an alley to avoid suspicion. He then declared that time would resume its course, and the world around him began to move again. Issei chose to walk since he was only a block away and still had 10 minutes. However, upon arriving at the academy, he noticed two hooded figures blocking the entrance. He politely asked them to step aside as he was in a hurry. One of the figures responded affirmatively, allowing him to pass. The second hooded figure inquired if he knew Rias Gremory. Just as Issei was about to answer, a dark-haired girl named Sona appeared, asking what they were doing at the academy. The hooded figures stated they were there to speak with the Gremory and Citrières. Sona instructed them to come back after school. Issei, who had been listening, remarked that he could leave now, holding a box of popcorn that seemed to have appeared from nowhere. Sona was surprised to see him there and told him to head to his classroom as he was running late. Issei realized she was right and rushed to his class, arriving just in time. Inside, two familiar faces greeted him. Matsuda and Motohama expressed their joy at seeing him again, calling him Issei-sama. Issei replied that he appreciated the sentiment but didn't need the honorifics as they would make him blush. They insisted he deserved it, claiming that he had brought peace to their souls. Just then, a girl approached the two perverts and playfully hit them on the head, scolding them for being inappropriate. Issei defended his friends, but the girl, feeling a bit sad, apologized to him, thinking he was reprimanding her. After classes, the two hooded figures were seen in the occult club alongside the Citri and Gremory groups. They removed their hoods, revealing two beautiful girls. One introduced herself as Irina Shido, and she recognized the three Hyoudou brothers. Ken noted that she looked familiar, and Irina reminded them that she had been their neighbor, playing together every day. Ryu recognized her resemblance to the Irina they once knew and asked her a question. Izari exclaimed in surprise, questioning if she hadn't been a boy. Ryu teased Izari about her modesty and Ken agreed. Irina then asked where Issei was. At this, everyone felt a chill, recalling how Issei had left them the day before. Suddenly Issei appeared from a corner of the room, announcing himself dramatically. Everyone was taken aback, having not noticed him before. Issei remarked on Irina's appearance, expressing surprise that she was a girl. Irina, flustered, asked who he was and how long he had been there. Issei answered her questions, smiling at her and causing her to blush. He explained that he had distanced himself from those who had wronged him, expressing his disdain for their past. Irina noted that life hadn't treated him well, to which Issei replied that he was now free from those he considered inferior. This comment irritated the brown-haired family members, prompting Ken to confront him about their parents' condition and how they felt when they learned he was alive. Issei acknowledged their feelings, which only fueled their anger further. Izari accused him of causing them pain by not wanting to be a family again, reminding him of his worth. Issei retorted that none of them cared about the suffering he endured, and now they wanted him back for his power, not for love or family. He demanded to know why they truly wanted him back. Hyoudou. This left everyone astonished by all that the blonde had endured, which justified his way of being. Even without anyone's support, he managed to move forward. Irina then remembered to introduce her companion, Zenobia Corda. Rias acknowledged that they had strayed from their topic and apologized for it. Everything unfolded like in the anime, including Asia and Zenobia, but this time Ryu was the one defending her. The battles between Zenobia and Kiba and Irina and Ryu ended swiftly. Laughter echoed throughout the area, coming from Issei, who had remained a mere spectator. Issei remarked on how easily they had defeated those simple opponents, his tone clearly mocking. Zenobia, confident in her abilities, challenged him to prove himself. Issei accepted, hoping she wouldn't regret it later. He jumped down from the tree where he had been perched, landing in the middle of the field in front of Zenobia, who regarded him with curiosity. Before either could charge at the other, Ken interjected, suggesting that Issei might need his help, glancing at Irina. However, Issei insisted that he didn't need any distractions and gestured for Irina to join the fight. Zenobia warned him that she didn't want to see him lament over the cuts from her sword. Issei pointed out the pile of opponents nearby, referring to the Hyoudou family, claiming he had already defeated them all at once and that it hadn't been difficult. The two church representatives were impressed, but Issei let out a hint of his dark aura, which intimidated everyone present, especially his opponents. Zenobia questioned who this guy was and, more importantly, how they had gotten involved with him. Issei taunted them, asking if they were scared. Irina confirmed that they indeed were. The two launched their attack, acknowledging that Issei was a threat. Issei, still smiling, asked how they wanted this to end. Zenobia warned him that due to his bad luck, they would have to finish quickly. Issei agreed, rising into the sky and shouting, "Ziwarudo!" Issei had delivered a powerful blow to each of his opponents, leaving them on the brink of unconsciousness. Time resumed its course as the scene unfolded. Imagining himself as Issei, he concluded the battle, causing the church's envoy to collapse, nearly losing consciousness. Everyone was once again in shock. Issei had done it again, finishing his fight in an instant. He thought to himself that this was the end of the confrontation. Zenobia, still in disbelief, questioned how he had defeated them so quickly. Issei decided to explain, invoking his stand, the world, making it visible for all to see. The onlookers were astonished, especially Rias, Sona, and the Hyoudou family, as they beheld the strange entity once more. Rias recognized it immediately, while Sona recalled Issei's earlier mention of the world. Issei confirmed that this was indeed the world. Sona speculated that the power Issei referred to as the ability to dominate the world must have a special skill that granted him such an advantage. Issei replied that they would have to discover that for themselves, clarifying that they were not friends, merely acquaintances for the time being. The others exchanged glances of sadness, aware of the struggles Issei had faced due to his masters and brothers. Suddenly, an impatient Ryu appeared, demanding to know what special ability Issei possessed, dismissing him as nothing more than a puppet. Issei felt anger rise within him at Ryu's words, believing that he and Dio's the world were perfect, standing above all alongside its bearer. He called out to Drake, and the gauntlet on Ryu's arm responded with a deep voice, identifying itself as the Red Dragon Emperor. Issei suggested that Drake should educate his bearer, warning that he would not show mercy to those he deemed worthless. To everyone's surprise, Drake advised Ryu to heed Issei's words, stating that he was on a completely different level, comparable to that of a cadre. Ryu, unfazed, dismissed Drake's warning, believing Issei to be nothing more than a charlatan. Issei retorted that unlike some, he had the strength to back up his words, reminding Ryu that he had already put him in his place before. Ryu, furious, declared that Issei would pay for his insolence and charged at him. Issei positioned his stand in front of him and declared that any attempt to rise against him was futile. In a swift motion, Issei unleashed a barrage of strikes, each accompanied by the word Muda, overwhelming Ryu with the force of his stand. The air was filled with the echoes of his power, leaving everyone in awe of Issei's capabilities. Issei imagined that Giorno was Issei, Golden Experience was the world, and the other was Ryu. After the intense battle, they went to check on Ryu, who was in a terrible state with nearly all his bones broken, causing horror among Rias and her group. Issei warned Drake that next time he wouldn't be so merciful, and Drake promised to try to reason with Ryu. Everyone left with expressions of dread, knowing that if they didn't hurry, Ryu might not survive. Issei thought this would teach them a lesson. He headed back to his apartment and enjoyed the rest of the week. However, on Sunday he sensed a great battle taking place and took off in that direction. Meanwhile, the Gremory group was struggling against the formidable Kokobile, who was overwhelming them. The Citri group was managing the barrier. Kokobile mocked them, expressing disappointment that he wasn't facing more of a challenge, especially from Ryu. He taunted Ryu, claiming he wasn't worthy of his power. Ryu retorted, insisting he would finish Kokobile himself. Kokobile dismissed him, lamenting that it was a waste to boast while in such a pitiful state. Just then, Kokobile began to form a massive lance of light visible from miles away. However, something struck him, causing him to lose focus and dissipate the lance. It was Issei arriving just in time to save the day. Kokobile, surprised, demanded to know who Issei was. Issei declared himself Kokobile's worst nightmare. Kokobile laughed, finding it amusing that a mere human thought he could pose a threat to a fallen angel. Issei assured him he would regret underestimating him. Kokobile feigned pity, questioning how his Cerberus hadn't sent Issei to his end. Issei pointed out that the Cerberus were over there in a pile of garbage. Kokobile's eyes widened in shock, realizing a human had managed to defeat his Cerberus. He acknowledged Issei as interesting, deciding not to underestimate him further. Irritated by being treated as ordinary, Kokobile launched several light lances at Issei. However, they vanished before reaching him, as if intercepted by something unseen. Issei began to radiate a powerful aura with Hamon, frightening Kokobile. Kokobile demanded to know what was happening and who Issei was. Issei repeated that he was Kokobile's worst nightmare. Kokobile, furious, unleashed a barrage of light lances, believing Issei to be finished. He turned his back on Issei, convinced he was defeated. Issei, however, stood up, challenging Kokobile's assumption. Kokobile, frustrated, questioned how Issei was still alive. Issei mockingly noted that the attack was supposed to kill him. To Kokobile's horror, Issei declared it was time for him to have some fun. Kokobile invited Issei to try, and Issei complied, charging at the fallen angel with incredible speed while activating his Hamon. He struck Kokobile multiple times, leaving him severely injured. Meanwhile, the Gremory and Citri groups, along with the church envoy, watched in disbelief as Issei effortlessly humiliated Kokobile. Zenobia remarked on Issei's immense power, noting he was doing what they should have accomplished, and he wasn't even straining himself. Rias declared that Issei had to join her group, overheard by Sona, who protested that she wanted him in her group instead. Rias suggested they would see which group he chose. Back in the fight, Issei challenged Kokobile, taunting him to bring more. Kokobile devised a plan to distract the group and Issei, hoping to escape. He claimed that their leader was no longer a threat, leaving everyone confused. To their shock, Kokobile revealed that their leader, God, had died in the last Great War alongside the former Satans, and they had already won the war until Azazel had ordered a retreat. Everyone was left in stunned silence except for Issei, who remained unfazed. He questioned what Kokobile expected him to do, congratulate him? Kokobile was bewildered that Issei wasn't shocked by such a revelation. Issei explained that he didn't care about the past, it was history, and it had nothing to do with the present or his intent to defeat Kokobile. Kokobile, agitated, decided to flee at full speed, but Issei shouted, "Zie Warudo." Time froze except for Issei, who approached Kokobile slowly. When he was close enough, he declared that this was the world. He unleashed a powerful attack, piercing Kokobile's stomach. As he withdrew his fist, Issei stated that Kokobile was already dead and didn't even know it, warning him that this was the consequence of facing a superior being. Time resumed its course. Issei watched as everything began to thaw, revealing the cadre flying away in the opposite direction. Just moments ago, he had been several meters away, but now he stood right next to the cadre, who lay lifeless with a hole in its stomach. At that moment, the barrier shattered, revealing a brilliant blue light that landed beside the cadre, with Drake addressing Albion. Drake remarked that Albion was ignoring him, and soon after, a white armor appeared, leading to Drake and Albion engaging in their usual banter. After a while, the Mao Leviathan arrived on the battlefield, with Rias and Sona providing updates on everything that had transpired. As they approached Issei, he suddenly vanished. Serafal wondered who that boy was, while Sona explained that he was a classmate who had single-handedly defeated the cadre and the Cerberus, leaving the Mao in complete shock. This shock intensified when Sona revealed that he was merely a human. After the academy was rebuilt, a group of brown-haired individuals gathered alongside a red-haired girl and a black-haired girl with their followers. Ryu expressed his frustration, claiming that he should have been the one to defeat the crow, not Issei. Rias suggested they put that topic aside and go rest, to which everyone present agreed. Meanwhile, Issei was busy storing a certain person's blood in a vial, smiling as he said that they were one step closer to reaching the sky. He then decided to go to sleep, knowing that the next day would be quite bothersome. The day after the incident with Kokobile, Issei was about to enter the academy when he noticed a group of 3 brown-haired individuals animatedly talking to an albino who exuded immense calmness. Issei planned to walk by unnoticed, but the albino placed a hand on his shoulder and introduced himself. The albino asked if Issei was indeed his name, to which Issei nodded. The albino continued, acknowledging that he had witnessed Issei humiliate Kokobile. Issei realized that this was the White Dragon Emperor. Curious, Issei asked what a celestial dragon wanted with him. Valley replied that he had come to meet his rival, but it turned out to be a total waste as Issei was far too weak. Issei shot back, noting that not only was he weak but also arrogant. The trio of brown-haired individuals chimed in, with Ryu claiming he could easily wipe the floor with the albino, asserting that he was a nobody who would soon be begging on his knees. Ken supported his brother, declaring that everyone was beneath them. Izari added that they were insignificant compared to the 3 of them. Issei remarked to Valley that while the trio lacked power, they certainly made up for it with their arrogance. Valley acknowledged Issei's point, and Issei questioned whether he had already brought the 3 of them to their knees. The discussion continued until 2 swords, one belonging to Kiba and the other to Zenobia, were poised threateningly near Vala's neck. Rias, a red-haired girl, made her presence known, questioning Vala's intentions in her territory. Vala casually replied that he had come to meet his rival, but it was clear to him that Ryu still had much to learn about power. Ryu, determined, warned Vala to pray that their confrontation would not come soon, as he intended to leave his mark on Vala's face. Valley welcomed the challenge and turned his attention to Issei, expressing his hope that Issei would provide a worthy fight, as he had little expectation of his current rival. With a confident smile, he vanished in a magical circle. Issei found himself amused by Vala's demeanor, while Rias cautioned Ryu to keep his guard up. Ryu promised to do so but insisted that he would not let Vala's arrogance go unchallenged. Issei teased Ryu, suggesting that he would have been easily defeated by Vala if given the chance. Their banter was interrupted by the school bells signaling the start of classes. prompting everyone to hurry to their respective classrooms. After class, the occult research club sat together when a magical circle appeared, revealing Griffia Lucifuge, the Mao's wife. Rias greeted her and learned that the Mao had summoned her to announce a faction meeting in 2 days to discuss a peace treaty among the 3 biblical factions. Griffia informed Rias that she had already notified Sona about the meeting, but added that the Mao required the presence of the one who had defeated Kokubile, as that person's opinion was crucial for the alliance. Rias agreed to relay the message. Kiba was tasked with finding Issei, who was napping under a tree, exhausted from classes. Kiba gently woke him, explaining that Rias needed him in the club. Issei reluctantly agreed, asking for a few more minutes to gather himself. Kiba waited patiently, and once Issei was ready, they headed to the club. Upon arriving, Kiba knocked and entered with Rias, who explained the situation regarding the upcoming meeting. Issei learned that his presence was essential, and before he could leave, Kaneko, a small albino girl, asked if she could inquire about his childhood. Issei humorously acknowledged her question, and Kaneko proceeded with her inquiries, prompting everyone's attention. As Issei began to share details of his past with the Hyoudou family and his experiences with Rias and Sona, the atmosphere shifted. The members of the Gremory entourage listened intently, their expressions reflecting a mix of shock and empathy for Issei's journey. When he finished, they stood and collectively apologized for the wrongdoings of their peers and their president. This gesture surprised both Rias and the 2 brown-haired boys, who had not expected such a display of solidarity. Issei reassured them that they were not to blame for the actions of others, suggesting that those who truly needed to apologize were absent. Ryu, feeling defiant, sarcastically asked if he should bow and kiss Issei's feet, which only irritated the 2 boys further. Ken dismissed the idea, stating they would not entertain such nonsense. Issei, confident in his abilities, reminded them that he could easily defeat them if he wished, just as he had with Kokubile. He briefly unleashed a fraction of his aura, causing a wave of unease among the group before he reined it in, leaving them with a sense of relief. With a smile, Issei bid farewell to the club members, leaving the girls blushing at his charm. Later that evening, Issei returned home ready to tackle his homework. Frustrated, he lamented the burden of assignments, wishing for a world without such tedious tasks. Issei decided to go to sleep, feeling that the next day would be both interesting and exhausting. The following day he could be seen getting ready for school. Issei had already put on his uniform and was preparing to head to the academy. On his way, he sensed more presences than usual around the school, which left him feeling quite confused. Upon arriving, he noticed older individuals alongside students, prompting him to mutter to himself in surprise that it was indeed Parents' Day. As Issei stood there, he was approached by a brown-haired boy. Ken told him not to move as some people wanted to see him. Issei, with a teasing tone, asked who it could be. Just then, someone placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Son, is that really you?" Issei responded with a hint of irritation, acknowledging that it was indeed him. At that moment, Issei's father arrived, inquiring about what was happening. His wife cheerfully informed him that it was Issei. Upon hearing this, Issei's father was overwhelmed with joy, tears welling up in his eyes as he expressed his happiness. Issei's parents expressed how much they missed him, but before they could say anything more, Issei interrupted them. He expressed his disdain for their hypocrisy, feeling disgusted that they would address him as if nothing had happened after all they had put him through. He declared that he never wanted to see them again. Hearing this, his parents were overcome with tears, lamenting their past actions. One of them pleaded for another chance to be the family they once were, speaking through their tears. Issei coldly responded that they had lost that opportunity long ago. The person they once knew was gone, and he would never forgive them for what they had done. He repeated that they should leave his sight. At that moment, Ryu and Izari arrived and intervened. Ryu questioned why Issei was speaking to their parents in such a harsh manner, pointing out that they were simply asking for a chance to make things right. Izari echoed this sentiment, urging Issei to consider what more they could do to prove themselves. Issei then stated that his first requirement was for them to be reborn. This declaration caught everyone's attention, as they hoped that fulfilling Issei's demand might restore their family. However, Issei was quick to crush their hopes with his next words. Ryu, feeling more than annoyed, thought Issei had crossed a line. He lunged at Issei, but before he could make contact, Issei unleashed a powerful aura that brought Ryu to his knees. Ken and Izari found themselves in a similar position, struggling to breathe. Their parents, however, felt as if they were being choked by the overwhelming pressure. The 3 siblings pleaded with Issei to stop, but he remained unyielding. Issei was reluctant, but at that moment, Rias appeared and expressed her concern. She urged Issei to be cautious, as his actions might attract the attention of those unaware of the supernatural world. Issei sighed, agreeing to her request, and ceased to suppress his aura. Those around him gasped for breath before regaining their composure. The bell rang, signaling the end of class, and everyone headed to their respective rooms. Ken, who shared a classroom with Issei, noticed his mother observing the sculpture he was working on. She cast discreet glances at Issei, which he easily noticed. Issei's mind was blank until he closed his eyes and opened them again, revealing a muscular man alongside another equally strong figure. It was none other than Dio in the world. The sculpture was so impressively crafted that everyone was astonished and offered money for it, but he politely declined. As classes ended, students left with their parents, and Issei was seen lying on his bed, resting peacefully, sensing that the next day would be particularly interesting. The following day, Issei decided to skip school, conserving his energy for a faction meeting scheduled to begin in 30 minutes. After the time passed, the leaders of each faction were gathered around a large table. On one side were the Gremory and Citri factions representing the demons, while the angels were led by their leader and the Archangel Gabriel, accompanied by Irina. The fallen angels were represented by their leader and the White Dragon Emperor. Azazel, the leader of the fallen angels, announced that they were ready. Michael, the angel leader, confirmed the same, as did Surzex, the demon leader. Azazel then questioned what they were waiting for, to which Surzex replied that they were still missing one person. Michael inquired who that person was, and Surzex revealed it was the one who had defeated Kokabeel. Azazel asked for the identity of this individual, just as the door opened to reveal Issei, his expression serious. He declared himself the one they were waiting for and took a seat beside the Mao. Surzex then officially began the meeting. As the discussion progressed, Surzex called for votes regarding war. Azazel and Michael both chose peace, and Surzex agreed but noted they needed to hear from the current Red and White Dragon Emperors as well as Issei. Ryu, the Red Dragon Emperor, opted for peace, while Vale, the White Dragon Emperor, expressed indifference as long as there were strong opponents to fight. Issei, with a sinister smile, pondered his choice, teasing the others with his demeanor. He finally decided on peace, stating that it would mean no one would bother him constantly. Everyone nodded in agreement, and Surzex announced the formation of an alliance among the biblical factions. However, before they could celebrate, time suddenly froze, leaving Issei momentarily astonished, sensing that someone else had caused the time stop. Surzex addressed Rias, suggesting that her peace had gone out of control. Rias was incredulous, having entrusted Kaneko with Issei's care. Suddenly, a magical bolt struck an army of hooded mages, revealing none other than the ancient Mao, Kateria Leviathan. This revelation left everyone stunned, while Seraphal, another Mao, expressed disbelief at her presence. As the others stood in shock, Issei moved freely in the frozen time, prompting Azazel to question how he could do so. Before Issei could respond, Ryu interrupted, asking for an explanation of the situation. Surzex clarified that time was currently stopped due to Rias's peace, and only those with significant power like himself, Azazel and Michael could move. Ryu and Vale could move thanks to their sacred gears, while Rias was protected by her connection to Issei. Surzex was puzzled about how Issei could also move. Issei finally explained that his ability was linked to the world, which allowed him to stop time for a maximum of 31 minutes. With an amplifier, his secondary fighting style could double that time, but it drained his energy more. In this weaker time-stop state he was not as affected. The revelation left everyone astonished, their eyes wide with disbelief. Azazel marveled at Issei's power and asked what he meant by greater scale. Issei clarified that he was referring to a universal scale. The room was filled with shock, and Michael, an angel, asked for clarification about the world. Issei revealed his stand, leaving some confused. Azazel inquired if it was his sacred gear, to which Issei clarified that it was his stand, positioning it behind him and exclaiming his battle cry. Everyone watched as Issei overwhelmed his brother under Rias's concerned gaze. Rias urged the others to intervene, fearing for his brother's safety. Before Rias could finish her sentence, Issei's brown-haired siblings rushed in to rescue him. Issei noticed their approach and sent Ryu flying to dodge a punch from the wielder of Tiamat. In a moment of distraction, Ken managed to land a small cut on Issei's chest, but to their horror, they witnessed Issei healing himself using Hamon, leaving no trace of the injury behind. Ken expressed disbelief at the situation, questioning how it was possible for Issei to heal so quickly, especially given the magical residue left by Yami's cuts. Izari commented on Issei's abilities, belittling him, despite his newfound power. At that moment, Ryu stood up, fully healed, and acknowledged Ken's efforts. He declared that they would not be able to defeat Issei together. As he approached his brothers, Ryu suggested they execute a powerful combination attack. The brothers exchanged glances, surprised by the proposition. Ken hesitated, recalling the consequences of their actions, but Ryu dismissed his concerns, asserting that Issei deserved to be defeated. Rias pleaded with them not to proceed, warning that they would kill him. Ryu responded that it was too late for mercy, insisting that Issei was beyond redemption. Ken agreed, lamenting the situation but believing that Issei had made his choice. Izari added that they had given him options, but he had stubbornly chosen the most difficult path. Issei, confident in his strength, declared that their confidence would lead to their downfall. He relished the thought of shattering their dreams and watching their expressions as he rose above them. He proclaimed that all their attempts against him were futile. Ryu challenged Issei, eager to see him try to withstand their combined might. The three brothers unleashed their most powerful attacks: Dragon Shot, Shadow Cut, and Devastation Ray. The sounds echoed throughout the area as they launched their assault. In response, Issei declared his power, revealing that he possessed the ability to dominate the world. His words left everyone in shock, recalling a time long past when they feared a similar fate. Just before their attacks could strike, Issei shouted once more, invoking his ultimate technique. Everyone was confused by how he had been addressed, but just before Azazel could ask what a stand was, a voice echoed through the area. Kateria remarked on the situation, calling out the false Mao for hiding like the frauds they were. At this comment, everyone was startled, having completely forgotten about them. They turned their attention to Issei but decided to make a plan. Rias and Ryu would go to rescue their ally while the others stayed behind to combat the enemy troops. Before they set off, Azazel handed a bracelet to Ryu, instructing him to use his blood if it didn't work, and then they proceeded to execute the plan. Azazel approached Kateria to confront her, and the battle unfolded much like in the original story. However, when Azazel let his guard down, Valley attacked him from behind just as Ryu arrived and time returned to normal. Azazel recognized Valley as the traitor, to which Valley responded that this side was much more entertaining. Azazel, confused, asked if Valley wanted to reclaim the throne, and Valley introduced himself as Valley Lucifer, a direct descendant of the ancient Mao Lucifer, leaving everyone in shock. At that moment, Valley looked at Ryu and remarked on the cruelty of life, pointing out that despite being a miracle and the one who could be considered the most powerful bearer of the White Dragon Emperor, Ryu was just a simple reincarnated demon without his sacred gear. Valley declared that he would turn Ryu into a vengeful warrior by killing each of his loved ones to provide him with a worthy fight. In response, Ryu stepped forward, expressing his disbelief that Valley would kill his loved ones for a mere whim. Valley confirmed this, noting that Ryu was starting to understand, which prompted Ryu to curse Valley and remind him of his promise to crush his face. Ryu activated his booster gear and donned his armor, launching himself at Valley, who effortlessly dodged his attacks. Valley then countered, landing 5 blows that left Ryu in a poor state. Valley taunted him, saying he had not even withstood the basic punches, expressing disappointment in Ryu's performance. Ryu insisted it was just luck, but Valley claimed he would end Ryu's life right then. Just as Valley was about to deliver the final blow, he was sent flying several meters away, exclaiming in surprise. Looking up, he saw Issei, who regarded Ryu with disdain while his stand loomed behind him, wearing an extremely confident and mocking smile. Issei expressed his disdain for Ryu, questioning how they could have ever been brothers. This revelation shocked those unaware of their relationship. Ryu insisted he could have finished it himself, but Issei dismissed him. Valley interrupted, asking what Issei thought he was doing. Issei clarified that he couldn't let Ryu die just yet, as he intended to be the one to kill him and make him pay for everything he had put him through alongside that family of brown-haired individuals. This left everyone in shock as they believed Issei and Ryu were family. Issei then addressed Seraphal, Leviathan and Zerzek, stating they would have a serious talk once he finished with this. The two could only nod in response, leaving Rias extremely nervous, realizing that if Issei planned to confront his brother, she was in deep trouble. Issei then apologized for making Valley wait, which caused Valley to smile broadly, having anticipated this moment for a long time. Valley launched an attack, throwing a punch that Issei managed to dodge. Valley continued his relentless assault, landing over 100 punches until he finally connected with one that barely affected Issei. Issei acknowledged Vala's effort, congratulating him for being the first to land a hit. This revelation shocked everyone, as Issei had claimed never to have been hit in battle before. Zerzek wondered who this person was, noting that his skills were on a completely different level. Michael remarked on the impressive ally they had gained. Azazel found Valley intriguing, particularly noting that his aura was that of an ordinary human. This revelation left the leaders in complete shock, as they had no idea a human could reach such heights, and they would soon discover that he was destined to go even further. Zerzek concluded that Valley was a monster and that he would need to recruit him into his faction. Back in the fight, Issei and Valley exchanged punches, and Valley expressed his satisfaction with the battle, congratulating Issei for meeting his expectations. In response, Issei began to laugh almost maniacally. Valley wondered what Issei found so amusing. Issei explained that he had not yet used any of his two fighting styles that he had mentioned earlier, which left everyone around them in shock, realizing it was true. Valley urged him to demonstrate these styles. Issei, recognizing Vala's worthiness, decided to grant him the privilege of experiencing them firsthand. With a determined expression, Issei took a deep breath, and a yellow light emanated from him. He introduced his secondary fighting style, which he called Hamon, and charged at Valley, delivering rapid blows that left Valley reeling in pain, feeling as if he were being burned. Valley exclaimed in surprise at the intensity of the attacks. Issei reminded him that this was merely his secondary style and warned him not to blame him for the outcome, as Valley had chosen this path. Issei immobilized Valley and let out a battle cry, declaring his next move, Sunlight Yellow Overdrive. Valley fell to the ground, injured but determined to rise again. Issei congratulated him on his admirable determination but warned him that he had yet to reveal his main fighting style. A sinister smile crossed Issei's face as Valley approached, attempting to strike back, only to be met with a powerful blow from Issei's stand. Issei explained that his stand strikes were far stronger than his own, causing Valley to tremble in fear, realizing that if Issei's words were true, he might not survive this encounter. Issei continued to unleash a barrage of strikes from his stand, the world under the watchful eyes of the onlookers, who felt pity for the albino fighter. As Issei unleashed his power, he repeatedly shouted commands, each strike resonating with intensity. When he saw that Valley was on the verge of surrendering, Issei let out a manic laugh, feeling close to achieving his goal. In that moment he pulled out a small vial from his pocket, collecting Valley's blood within it. Azazel questioned Issei's intentions with the blood, to which Issei replied that he aimed to attain the maximum power ever achieved by anyone. The audience was left in shock, realizing that Issei believed he would become invincible with this blood. He explained that with Vala's blood and the blood of the Red Emperor, he could complete a ritual to ascend to a higher realm. This revelation left the angelic faction confused, as they were unaware of any such ritual. Issei then produced another vial of blood, expressing gratitude for Ryu's donation, which would help him reach his objective. He warned that the only complication was that he would have to destroy his stand temporarily, as it was essentially his soul. If he failed to survive the process, he would meet a humiliating end. He summoned his stand and poured the blood of both Valley and Ryu onto it. A brilliant light filled the area, forcing everyone present to shield their eyes. Issei began to levitate, witnessing his stand crack and his whole being glow. Once the light faded, Issei's appearance remained unchanged, but the power radiating from him left the onlookers in awe. He declared that he had achieved a state of transcendence, revealing that his stand had transformed into a brilliant white with golden accents. Issei shouted in triumph, having surpassed all mortals and become a superior being. And thus, the chapter concluded, leaving the audience captivated by the unfolding events. Issei was gradually losing his shine as he looked at his hands and clenched them. He emanated a terrifying power that intimidated all the leaders present until he decided to speak. He mentioned that this was heaven, finishing his brief statement with a smile. Suddenly, a magic circle appeared, revealing a young man dressed in traditional Chinese clothing who then spoke, commenting on Issei's recent struggle. The newcomer remarked that Issei had faced a tough opponent, pointing to Ryu. Issei clarified that his real adversary was the one standing nearby, gesturing towards himself with a smile. The newcomer, taken aback by Issei's immense power, hesitated, feeling a sense of dread. He asked who Issei was, his voice trembling as he sensed an aura that felt almost divine. Issei responded, noting that it was rude to ask someone to introduce themselves without first sharing his own name. The newcomer introduced himself as Biko, a descendant of Sun Wukong. Issei expressed surprise at meeting someone like him in this place and introduced himself as Issei Brando, pleased to make his acquaintance. Biko acknowledged the pleasure but mentioned he needed to take Valley back. Issei agreed but first approached Valley's unconscious body. He summoned his stand and delivered a gentle blow, creating a brief illusion of distortion and a flash of light. When the light faded, Valley was fully healed as if he had never been harmed. Everyone was astonished by the speed and effectiveness of Issei's healing ability. Biko exclaimed disbelief, noting that even a sacred gear couldn't heal someone that quickly. Issei explained that his power surpassed that of a simple sacred gear. As Biko prepared to leave, Issei bid him farewell. Biko disappeared in a magic circle, taking the now rejuvenated Valley with him. Many were still in shock over what they had witnessed when a fallen angel spoke up. Azazel questioned what had just happened, echoing Biko's disbelief. Issei reiterated that his power was far beyond that of a typical sacred gear. At that moment, a striking angel entered the conversation, introducing herself as Gabriel. She confirmed Issei's identity and revealed her ability to see into people's hearts, noting that while part of Issei's heart was pure, another part was dark. Before Gabriel could elaborate, Issei interjected, explaining that his heart was made of pure malice. This revelation surprised Gabriel and the others, as they had never encountered someone like him before. Just then Ryu, a brown-haired figure, interrupted, demanding Issei do something useful and heal him as he had done for Valley. Issei replied that he had only healed Valley because he liked him, and his situation with Ryu was different. Ryu insisted that Issei should comply with his orders, but Issei warned him that he was not in a position to make demands. He reminded Ryu that he had previously advised Drake to educate him. Drake's voice emerged from the gauntlet, confirming that he had tried but failed. Issei issued a final warning to Ryu and his troublesome family. This caught the attention of Ryu's brothers, Ken and Izumi, who threatened Issei, demanding he comply with their orders. Suddenly, Tiamat's voice emerged from Izari's gauntlet, cautioning the trio about the danger Issei posed. Issei expressed relief that someone recognized the threat he represented. Tiamat apologized on behalf of her host for their behavior towards Issei, who reassured her that it was not a concern. He hinted that he would eventually teach them a well-deserved lesson. Before Tiamat could respond, Ryu, now healed, approached Issei with his brothers, declaring their intent to put him in his place. Issei found their determination amusing, noting that he had been thinking the same thing. The three brothers confronted Issei, who wore a mocking smile. Surzek intervened, questioning whether they were sure about facing Issei under these conditions, and if Issei was confident he could handle three opponents at once. Issei assured him it would not be a problem, as they would serve as test subjects for his new abilities. Surzek approved the challenge, advising them to avoid serious injury. Ryu scoffed at the warning, stating it would be difficult, especially against Issei. Michael urged them to begin, and Azazel agreed, suggesting it would be a good opportunity to study their abilities. Before they could move, Issei was already behind them, laughing at their lack of awareness. Ken remarked that Issei's movements had improved, but it did not make him invincible. The three brothers launched a powerful punch at Issei, but he did not budge an inch. Issei laughed, taunting them about their efforts. They continued to strike, but it felt as though they were hitting a solid steel wall. As Issei closed his eyes, Ken seized the moment to attack with his sword, aiming for a deep stab. However, the moment the blade touched Issei's skin, it shattered into pieces. Growing tired of their attempts, Issei decided to retaliate, delivering a powerful blow that sent the three brothers crashing into a column. Issei found their efforts pathetic. Ken expressed his disappointment, expecting more from the others, before taking flight and vanishing from sight. Ryu commented on Ryu's absence, suggesting he had fled like the coward he always was. Just as they were about to say more, a bright yellow light descended toward the three brown-haired individuals. It was Issei arriving with a bulldozer, and he shouted loudly. With a loud shout, the massive road roller was dropped, causing many onlookers to gasp in horror. They believed it would crush everything beneath it, but what they didn't realize was that the brown-haired fighters were striking from below the machine. Issei declared that it was too late for anyone to escape. As the tension rose, the fighters continued to strike the road roller with determination, their shouts echoing around them. The atmosphere was charged with energy as they pushed against the overwhelming weight of the machine. The cries of Muda filled the air, a powerful chant that resonated with their resolve. They were determined to overcome the odds, refusing to be defeated. With a fierce battle cry, They urged their comrades to fight back against the impending doom, rallying together to stand strong against the challenge ahead. Everyone was horrified by what Issei had just done. He had harmed his brothers. Rias spoke up, expressing her shock at the situation. She confronted him, questioning how he could commit such an act against his own family. Issei dismissed her concerns, claiming that their demise was due to their weakness. Rias pleaded with him to reconsider, but Zerzek interjected, apologizing to Rias while explaining that it was their choice, and he could do nothing about it. As they argued about the events that had unfolded, they failed to notice 3 brown-haired figures sneaking up behind the bulldozer, preparing to launch a surprise attack on Issei. Ryu declared that Issei would not escape unscathed, unleashing a powerful attack. Izari followed suit, stating that it was payback for all the humiliation they had endured. Ken added that this was for the way their parents had been treated. The 3 of them unleashed their strongest attacks, but Issei merely watched with a mocking expression. He thought about how many times he had evaded their attacks, but this time would be different. He decided not to use his time-stopping ability against them. Instead, he would showcase one of his new skills. He warned them that if they planned to attack him with their insignificant energies, they should know that all their efforts would be in vain. With that, Issei summoned his stand, which effortlessly countered their 3 attacks. The energy from their strikes distorted and vanished with a single blow, leaving everyone witnessing the battle in shock. Zerzek marveled at Issei's absurd power, noting how he could eliminate attacks of such magnitude with just a touch. Azazel expressed his growing interest in studying Issei's abilities, while Michael asked Gabriel for her thoughts. Gabriel acknowledged that having Issei on their side was beneficial, especially considering his immense power and the formidable allies he possessed. Back in the fight, Issei taunted his opponents, asking if they had accepted their defeat. Ryu defiantly stated that they would never yield to someone like him. Issei, as a reward for their determination, offered to let each of them land 1 direct hit, regardless of whether it was magical or physical, without making any moves to defend himself. The spectators were left speechless, realizing he was allowing them to inflict damage on him without flinching. Zerzek reiterated that Issei was reckless, questioning whether he understood the potential consequences of his actions. Azazel reassured him that if Issei was willing to take the hits, he must have a plan in mind. Zerzek agreed but wanted to clarify Issei's intentions. He called out to Issei, asking if he was sure about his decision. Issei confidently affirmed that he was. Michael warned Issei that whatever happened next would be his responsibility. Issei acknowledged this and everyone watched with anticipation. Rias voiced her concerns, suggesting that if Issei truly allowed himself to be hit, Ryu would finish him off quickly. Zerzek disagreed, believing Issei must have something up his sleeve, but wondered what it could be. Before they could ponder further, the 3 attackers announced they were ready and launched their best attacks once more. Issei opened his arms, allowing the strikes to hit him. A massive cloud of smoke erupted, and the brothers celebrated, convinced they had defeated him. However, before they could say anything, a laugh emerged from the smoke, and Issei appeared, bearing 1st and 2nd degree burns, yet still laughing. Everyone was astonished that Issei was still alive, as those 3 combined attacks could inflict significant harm on anyone, or in the worst-case scenario, lead to death. Azazel expressed his disbelief, wondering how Issei had survived. Issei acknowledged that their attacks were powerful enough to leave him with a few burns, complimenting them for their strength. Ken, equally shocked, questioned how Issei was not dead. Issei decided to explain, capturing everyone's attention. He revealed that by achieving a state he called heaven, his body was no longer bound by the limitations of a normal human. His strength and speed were now at levels far beyond any being human, angel, fallen, or demon. As for his stamina and energy, they were vast, if not infinite. This declaration left everyone in utter shock. If Issei had already possessed great power, this was simply absurd. Issei then turned to Ryu, indicating that they had some unfinished business. Ryu felt a cold sweat run down his back, realizing that if Issei's words were true, he was facing a formidable opponent. Ryu dismissed Issei's claim, but Issei was determined to prove himself. In an instant he appeared next to Ryu and struck him with his stand, creating a distortion effect that sent Ryu stumbling backward. Ryu, confused and alarmed, demanded to know what Issei had done to him. Issei casually suggested that Ryu try activating his sacred gear, but Ryu was terrified and unable to summon it. It felt as if Drake had vanished, leaving him helpless. This revelation frightened everyone, as Issei had immobilized Ryu's sacred gear. Zerzek recognized the threat Issei posed and felt compelled to recruit him for his faction. Michael agreed, noting the immense power they would gain with such an ally. Azazel was left speechless, pondering what kind of monster Issei was to disable a sacred gear. Ken and Izari, finally recovering from their shock, confronted Issei, demanding he return Ryu's sacred gear, insisting it belonged to him alone. Issei merely frowned, stating that they were in his way. He then delivered a powerful punch with his stand, knocking both of them unconscious. Turning to Ryu, Issei explained what had happened to his sacred gear, raising his hand to reveal a green glow as Ryu's gauntlet appeared in his possession. This revelation nearly gave everyone a heart attack. They understood that Issei was not to be underestimated. Issei proclaimed that he would demonstrate why he would have been the better bearer of Drake. He began to unleash a series of enhancements that seemed endless, leaving Ryu in total shock. Ryu had only been able to perform a maximum of 20 enhancements during his time as a bearer, while Issei surpassed him effortlessly in just a second. As Issei continued, a wicked smile spread across his face, and he activated the balance breaker. The crowd was left in stunned silence, having witnessed so much in a single day. Zerzek expressed his lack of surprise, while Azazel admitted he had anticipated this moment. Issei deactivated the gauntlet and approached Ryu, delivering another blow with his stand to restore him to normal. Before doing so, he tossed the gauntlet back to Ryu, stating that it wouldn't make sense to destroy him. Ryu remained silent, and Issei returned to the others, asking what they thought. Everyone was at a loss for words. Issei noted that it was getting late and that he should be on his way. Just then Zerzek grabbed his shoulder, insisting he couldn't leave yet. Issei inquired why not, and Zerzek explained that he needed to help rebuild the academy. Issei agreed, stating it would be ready in a minute. He summoned his stand and struck the ground, causing all the debris to transform into a simple leaf falling from the sky. With another blow, a brand new academy emerged as if nothing had ever happened. Satisfied, Issei prepared to leave once more. He summoned his stand and struck the air, tearing open a portal through which he entered, leaving everyone astonished. The others also began to depart through a magical circle to rest, leaving a distressed Ryu alongside his unconscious brothers as they returned home. Before anything else, the author wanted to express gratitude for all the support received, noting that today they decided to continue writing and were thrilled to see nearly 700 views and 36 votes on the story so far. In the chapter, Issei was in his room playing video games with friends when a random player made a comment about him lacking skill. Another player chimed in, teasing him further. Issei decided to respond with a clever retort, suggesting that the only one who would be removed was the player's mother from a certain inappropriate setting. The laughter from his teammates echoed in the background, and Issei shrugged off their banter, asking if they wanted to join another game. However, his friends opted to disconnect, leaving him to mutter about their lack of commitment. He realized it was time to head to the academy. At the academy, Issei walked calmly through the halls, entering his classroom and taking his seat just as the teacher walked in with a book in hand. The teacher requested everyone to sit down and announced that they would be discussing linear equations. Issei found the class boring, as he had gained immense power that made mundane tasks like paperwork and assignments trivial. With just a touch, he could alter reality and make them disappear. While in the courtyard, Issei recalled an incident involving someone who could stop time, and a mischievous smile crossed his face. Meanwhile, Rias was in her club, brainstorming ways to get Issei to join her group again and mend their relationship with her brothers. She was determined to find a way to bring him back into their fold. Aquino interrupted her thoughts, reminding Rias that Issei had endured overwhelming experiences that no one should have to face, especially at such a young age. Rias acknowledged Aquino's point, expressing her regret over how things had turned out with Issei. Aquino pressed her to consider her intentions, warning that approaching him with ulterior motives could lead to dire consequences, as he showed no mercy to anyone. Rias promised to think it over, admitting her confusion about the situation. Aquino reassured her that it was understandable given the power Issei had displayed. Rias thanked Aquino for her support, acknowledging that she was grateful for her presence, especially after the events of that day. Suddenly, the door burst open with a loud bang, revealing Issei, who called out to Rias with urgency. Rias asked what he wanted, and Issei demanded to see Gasper. Rias, taken aback, questioned his intentions, but Issei insisted that it was none of her concern. He reminded her that she was not in a position to refuse him, given his power to erase her existence with a single touch. Rias felt a chill run down her spine, fully aware of the truth behind his words. Before Rias could respond, Aquino intervened, suggesting that Rias simply introduce Issei to Gasper to avoid further conflict. Aquino then asked Issei about his interest in Gasper, to which Issei replied that he merely wanted to meet him, a response that raised suspicion in the two girls. Aquino urged Rias to tell Issei where Gasper was, and after a moment of hesitation, Rias revealed that he was in the third hallway to the right. Issei acknowledged the direction with a simple grunt and proceeded to walk calmly toward the indicated location. Meanwhile, Gasper was in his box, slowly emerging to grab some sweets that Kaneko had left for him. He reflected on his tendency to ruin everything he loved, feeling a sense of despair. Just then time froze around him, causing Gasper to panic. Now that he was there, he remained silent as he heard footsteps approaching. Issei entered the dark room, which had a somber atmosphere. Gasper, feeling frightened, asked who he was, sensing the sinister aura that Issei emitted. Issei reassured him, telling him not to be scared. Gasper was still anxious and questioned Issei about his intentions. Issei explained that he simply wanted to get to know him, but he had heard Gasper say that having such power was a bad thing. Gasper revealed that since acquiring his power, he had only been met with disdain from others. Issei countered that it wasn't true. The fear others had of Gasper stemmed from their own weakness, not from the power he possessed. Gasper expressed his feelings of isolation, stating that Issei wouldn't understand what it was like to always feel hunted and on edge, fearing harm from others. Hearing this, Issei lowered his head, recognizing the shared pain between them. Before Gasper could say more, Issei assured him that he understood his struggles, as he had faced similar challenges in his own life. This revelation brought a melancholic expression to Gasper's face, as he felt a connection to Issei, sensing something familiar yet unidentifiable about him. Gasper hesitated, questioning how he could trust Issei. In response, Issei promised to share his story in detail, recounting the hardships he faced in his childhood, how he was mistreated, and how he was regarded as worthless by others. Gasper, surprised, expressed his apologies, bowing toward Issei. Issei gently told him not to apologize, as they had both endured similar situations without support, relying on a single pillar of strength that encouraged them through their darkest moments. Issei smiled nostalgically, remembering Dio, the one who had always been there for him, and he shared that sentiment with Gasper. Issei encouraged Gasper to see the potential in his power, explaining that the possibilities were endless. Gasper began to see things differently and expressed his desire to become stronger, so he wouldn't have to lose anyone dear to him again. Issei agreed, but Gasper mentioned a concern about their president's approval. Issei smiled, assuring him that it wouldn't be a problem. He then declared that time would return to its normal flow, leaving Gasper astonished by Issei's control over his power. Gasper eagerly asked if he could learn to do the same. Issei promised to teach him everything he knew, filling Gasper with excitement at the prospect of finally mastering his sacred gear. He instructed Gasper to follow him. With a determined yes, Gasper followed Issei to Rias's office, where she was seated reviewing paperwork. Issei greeted her, asking what she was doing. Rias explained that she was handling some paperwork and inquired about Issei's unexpected visit. Issei mentioned that he wanted to take Gasper with him. A loud scream echoed throughout the place, startling everyone. Issei remarked that there was no need to shout, while Rias apologized, explaining that it was unusual for him to suddenly announce he would be taking Gasper to his room. Issei reassured her that it would be for the best, as he intended to help Gasper embrace his true potential as a vampire. Rias asked how long he planned to keep Gasper, to which Issei replied that he hoped to spend every weekend with him to strengthen his abilities. Rias agreed but noted that it sounded as if they were divorced parents discussing their child. Issei acknowledged the oddity of it but proposed a deal. Before they could finalize their agreement, Rias requested that Issei handle some paperwork. With a deep breath, Issei touched the documents and in an instant the tedious task was completed. He declared that the deal was closed and called for Gasper as they headed to Issei's house. Issei explained to Gasper that they would use the weekend to train him, but first they needed to work on his attitude and help him become more assertive. Gasper questioned what was wrong with his current demeanor, and Issei pointed out that his shyness would hold him back from gaining control over himself. Gasper accepted the challenge and asked when training would begin. Issei responded that it would start immediately, wearing a mischievous smile. 2 days later, on a Monday, students were heading to school, but the focus was on Issei and Gasper as they left the house for the academy. After a short walk, they arrived at the entrance and made their way to the occult club. Upon reaching the door, they knocked and received a pass from Rias. Issei greeted everyone, introducing the new Gasper, which raised some eyebrows since the room was empty. Just then a loud noise erupted from within, and out came a transformed Gasper, now dressed in traditional vampire attire, showcasing a more muscular physique and longer hair. The sight left everyone in awe of his newfound masculinity. Gasper confidently declared himself a perfect being alongside his servant, standing proudly next to Issei as they struck a pose reminiscent of a popular anime. The spectacle left the others sweating, while Rias felt uncertain, questioning whether this was truly the Gasper she once knew. Just as she was about to speak, two brown-haired students entered, immediately addressing the group. Ryu greeted everyone but pointedly excluded Issei from his greeting, which earned a nonchalant response from him. Ryu then asked who the attractive newcomer was. At this, Issei and Gasper exchanged mischievous smiles, surprising some of their peers who wondered if this was really the same Gasper. Issei began to introduce him, but Gasper interrupted, eager to make his own statement. Kono Gasper da. The transformation of Gasper left two brown-haired individuals astonished, unable to comprehend how someone could change so drastically in just 2 days. It wasn't even 2 months or 2 weeks, it was merely 2 days. Ken expressed disbelief, stating that it couldn't be possible for someone to change so much in such a short time. Ryu agreed, remarking that it felt unreal. Akino interjected, reminding them that since they had become demons, they had witnessed things beyond the imagination of any being, especially with Issei's arrival, who had shown that the impossible could indeed become possible. Issei thanked Akino for her words. At that moment, a small Nikomata, Kaneko, spoke up, asking how Gasper could have changed so much in just 2 days. Issei explained that Gasper had not only trained for 2 days, in fact he had trained for 10 years. This revelation left many confused, prompting Kiba to question how that was possible when Gasper's time-stopping ability only lasted 30 minutes. Issei clarified that he had gained many powers upon achieving the heaven state, including reality distortion. He had modified one of his rooms to function as a time chamber, where 5 years would pass in a single day, greatly accelerating Gasper's training. He also mentioned that he had transformed Gasper into a full vampire while ensuring he retained his demon side and modified his body to withstand sunlight. Everyone was astonished by Issei's ability to bend reality without complication and how he had accelerated someone's power so dramatically. Issei announced that it was time for him to leave, having fulfilled his duty as a teacher for the day. Gasper bid farewell, expressing his desire to transcend further before he could even land a hit. Issei reassured him and encouraged him to demonstrate a small part of his training. Gasper prepared to showcase his abilities, summoning a weapon from his forearm and cutting his arm, surprising everyone with the action. However, they were even more amazed when he reattached his arm, which was now as good as new. It was clear that he had become incredibly resilient. But then Rias interrupted, stating that with his new power, Gasper could serve her twice as well. Gasper shot her a sharp look and firmly stated that he only served Issei, releasing a dark aura that silenced the room before he went to a nearby couch and fell asleep. Rias remarked that it was evident Issei had trained him, while Akino agreed, noting that Gasper was still the same at heart. Meanwhile, Issei sat in his classroom, bored and contemplating his new plan to rise above everyone and establish his own empire. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of bells signaling the end of classes. Upon arriving at his mansion, Issei headed to his training room, which he had labeled as such for Gasper, who did not require traditional training since he could alter his body's reality to gain infinite strength, speed, and endurance. As Issei entered the training room, he wore a dark smile and struck the floor with his stand, causing a light to emerge and reveal a silhouette. The figure questioned how they were alive when they should have perished in battle. Issei welcomed the figure back to the world, introducing himself as Issei Brando. The figure, surprised, asked what they were doing there. Issei explained that he had revived them. The figure was astonished, inquiring if Issei had used some kind of sacred gear. Issei clarified that his power transcended mere sacred gears. It was the ultimate power. This revelation left Lucifer slightly surprised, still processing the fact that he had been revived without feeling any change. Issei urged him to skip the formalities and join him, promising to restore his original Mao throne. As Issei and Lucifer discussed future plans, Issei noted Lucifer's attentive and cooperative demeanor, which was unexpected given Lucifer's status as one of the oldest and most powerful beings. Issei decided to address this. He apologized to Lucifer, admitting that he had a very different perception of him. Lucifer tilted his head in confusion, prompting Issei to explain that he had assumed, due to Lucifer's ancient lineage, that he would possess a high ego like other demons and supernatural beings. He found Lucifer's cooperation somewhat suspicious. Lucifer responded that his previous attitude had been driven by the hatred he held for his father and the expectations placed upon him by his people. He had never desired the throne or to rule, finding it burdensome. His true goal had been to guide someone to take his place and reform the underworld, a task he had failed, leaving behind inept leaders. However, he believed he could redeem himself with Issei's help. Issei was taken aback by Lucifer's unexpected appearance. This was not the image he had of the ancient and ruthless ruler of the underworld. The honorific title of Sama added to Issei's surprise, as he was certain that Lucifer had not used his mental control by accident. This was a magnificent development for Issei, as he had not only gained a powerful ally but also someone who recognized him as their master. Lucifer inquired about the next steps, to which Issei responded that he needed a moment to process the revelation. Understanding this, Lucifer patiently waited. Issei then decided that it would be best for Lucifer to rest in one of the rooms of the house, promising to give him his orders the following day. Lucifer acknowledged this and wished Issei a good rest. The next day, Issei was ready to head to the academy. As he descended the stairs, he was surprised to find Lucifer standing by the door, dressed in a butler's outfit. Upon reaching the bottom, Issei was greeted with a polite, "Good morning, Issei-sama," followed by Lucifer announcing that breakfast was served at the table. Issei expressed his gratitude, albeit a bit uncertain. After finishing his breakfast, Lucifer offered to carry Issei's belongings to the academy. Issei politely declined, explaining that it would be best for Lucifer to remain hidden for now, as revealing his presence could cause a stir among the factions if they knew he was alive. Lucifer understood and suggested using a magic circle for Issei's departure. Issei agreed, confident that there would be no issues with that. Lucifer proceeded to create the magic circle while bidding Issei farewell. Issei stepped into the circle and soon found himself emerging from an alley a few blocks away from the academy. Sensing something was off, he quickened his pace. Upon arriving, he noticed the campus was deserted. Checking his phone, he discovered that it was a holiday, causing him to fall back in disbelief, cursing the fact that he had woken up early for nothing. Before leaving, Issei sensed magical presences coming from the occult club. Curious, he decided to investigate. Upon arrival, he paused time and stealthily entered, hiding in a corner to avoid detection. He then uttered a phrase that would set events in motion. Issei had just finished his conversation with Azazel and decided to head to a cafe located 2 blocks away. As he walked calmly toward the cafe, he reviewed his plans and what he would do once he entered the underworld. Issei knew he had to be careful at this point. One wrong move could complicate everything more than he wanted. Without realizing it, Issei arrived at the cafe, which had a rather peculiar name, Antiku. Upon entering, he was immediately attended to by a waitress who welcomed him and directed him to the only available table. After taking a seat, the waitress asked what he would like to order. Issei replied that a coffee would be fine, but he didn't expect a girl to approach his table and ask if she could sit down since there were no other seats available. She introduced herself as Jolin Kujo after Issei invited her to sit. They quickly struck up a conversation that lasted for hours, losing track of time as they discussed their interests and preferences. Eventually, Jolin mentioned that she had to leave and offered her phone number to Issei so they could talk again. Issei agreed and they exchanged numbers before heading home. Upon arriving at his mansion, Issei was greeted by Lucifer, who asked about his day. Issei mentioned that he had met a girl, prompting Lucifer to tease him about it, which made Issei blush slightly. He dismissed the teasing, stating that he was tired and needed to sleep. The next morning, Lucifer woke Issei for breakfast. After eating, Issei got ready to go to the occult club to sort out his affairs with the Gremory family and discuss their trip to the underworld. When he arrived at the club, he found only Rias and Aquino, who were planning their vacation in the underworld. Aquino greeted him and Rias followed suit, which surprised her since Issei rarely spoke to her. She asked if he was in a good mood, to which Issei responded that it was simply polite to return a greeting. Rias found it odd that he was speaking to her at all, but Issei explained that he was there because Azazel had informed him they would be going to the underworld, and he needed to join them. Rias was surprised but understood, noting that she was about to decide with Sona that they would leave the next day on their family train. Issei confirmed that they would see each other then. Before they could continue their conversation, Gaspar rushed in and jumped onto Issei in greeting. Issei asked when they would be heading to the underworld, and Gaspar confirmed that was all he wanted to know. At that moment, the door opened, revealing two serious-looking boys who immediately complained about Issei's presence. Ryu questioned why Issei was there, and Rias explained that he was just passing through to discuss their trip. Ken warned Issei to behave, but Issei interrupted, stating that it was clear how inferior they were compared to him. Ken retorted that they would show him the results of their training, to which Issei scoffed, dismissing their efforts as nothing compared to a basic training routine. Ryu taunted Issei, suggesting he was envious of their past accolades, but Issei remained silent, looking down. Ken continued to mock him, calling him a loser, but Issei stood firm, knowing he had more to offer than they realized. The word crybaby echoed in Issei's mind, causing his aura to surge with an intensity that filled the room, creating a suffocating atmosphere for everyone present. While Gasper seemed unaffected, the others felt an overwhelming urge to escape. The aura radiated anger and fury, reminiscent of a predator that had just found its prey. Issei lifted his gaze, his eyes reflecting a darkness that hinted at the worst of emotions, his serious expression revealing the depth of his rage and power. His skin began to pale as his power escalated uncontrollably, seemingly boundless. Just then, a magic circle appeared beside him and Lucifer emerged, prepared with another magic circle. He cast it towards Issei, who fell into a deep sleep. Seeing that Issei was now under control, Lucifer spoke calmly. Lucifer acknowledged the situation, apologizing for the disturbances caused by Issei and stating that he would take him home. He then created a magic circle and departed from the scene. An absolute silence enveloped the room, no one dared to speak and the air was thick with astonishment. They had never witnessed such a display of power, and the fear of what could have happened only intensified their anxiety. As the shock began to fade, Gasper was the first to react. He grabbed the heads of the two brown-haired boys and slammed them against the wall, expressing his frustration. Gasper shouted in anger, berating them for their foolishness and emphasizing that their master could have harmed them. Rias intervened, urging Gasper to release them, fearing he might seriously hurt them. Gasper insisted that the master was right about their weakness, pointing out that they had fainted under pressure. He released them, allowing them to drop to the floor. Rias urged Gasper to let it go, stating it was pointless. Just then, Aquino interrupted, agreeing with Gasper and highlighting the potential disaster if Issei had not been controlled. She suggested it was time to address Ryu and Ken, then went to prepare tea. At that moment, the other members of the occult club arrived, noticing the pale faces and inquiring about what had happened. Aquino took the time to explain the events that had unfolded. Meanwhile, Issei had awakened and asked Lucifer what had transpired. Lucifer informed him that he had nearly harmed the members of the occult club. Issei, confused, sought clarification as he couldn't recall the events clearly. Lucifer elaborated, explaining that Issei had lost control due to his anger, activating his instincts and releasing a tremendous amount of power that had overwhelmed the others. Before he could cause any harm, Lucifer had intervened, putting him to sleep with a magic circle to prevent a tragedy. Issei was taken aback, only remembering the insults from his brothers, never realizing he had acted purely on instinct, as he usually managed his emotions well. He expressed a wish that he had dealt with the troublesome duo of brown-haired boys. Lucifer chuckled, imagining their terrified expressions. Issei admitted he would have enjoyed that. Lucifer then mentioned that someone had called, recalling a name that sounded like Jolin. Issei's eyes widened in surprise at the mention. Lucifer commented that Issei had not asked him anything, wearing a smile. Issei decided to leave, mentioning he needed to make a call. Lucifer acknowledged that he also had things to do and began to walk away as Issei dialed a number on his phone, waiting for someone to answer. Issei introduced himself, saying he was Issei. Jolin, on the other end, recognized his voice and asked why he hadn't answered her calls. Issei explained he had been busy. Jolin suggested they meet at the cafe, to which Issei agreed, curious about the reason for the meeting. Jolin playfully remarked that they could talk as friends. Issei confirmed he was on his way and Jolin said she would head there too. As Issei hung up the phone and started to leave, Lucifer called out to him, teasing that he was making Jolin crazy. Issei felt a blush creeping onto his face, acknowledging Jolin's charms but reminding himself that they had only known each other for less than a week. He insisted to Lucifer that they were just friends, to which Lucifer responded with a knowing tone. Upon arriving at the cafe, Issei spotted Jolin sitting and waiting for him. She wore a white dress adorned with flowers, brown sandals, and her makeup was flawless. The most striking feature was the bright green of her lips, which complemented her hair beautifully. Issei felt his face heat up at how well Jolin had presented herself, momentarily lost in admiration until she called him over to sit. Once seated, Issei asked if she had been waiting long. Jolin replied that she had just arrived, encouraging him to relax and asking about his day. Issei mentioned that his day had been ordinary and inquired about hers. Jolin shared that she had been in a better mood lately. Issei playfully suggested it might be because of him, causing her to deny it. Curious about the purpose of their meeting, Issei pressed Jolin for an explanation. She revealed that she would be traveling with her family the next day and likely wouldn't have good phone reception. Issei noted that he also planned to go somewhere without signal, finding it a curious coincidence. After discussing their travel plans, Issei proposed they spend the rest of the day having fun. Jolin suggested the amusement park, raising her chin thoughtfully. Issei agreed enthusiastically and added that they could get ice cream afterward. Jolin loved the idea, and they decided to head out immediately. They spent the day at the amusement park, enjoying each other's company so much that it felt like only a moment had passed. They were so absorbed in their time together that they seemed like a couple in love. After their adventures, they walked hand in hand toward an ice cream shop nearby. Their joyful energy attracted the attention of a couple who approached them, commenting on how they had seen them throughout the day and how it seemed like a coincidence. The young man remarked that they wished they could have a relationship like theirs, and the young woman added that they would leave them to enjoy their time. Issei and Jolin exchanged shy glances, both blushing at the unexpected attention. Jolin then asked if this counted as a date, leaving Issei puzzled and curious about her meaning. They were just friends. Jolin reminded Issei not to fall in love, to which he jokingly responded. As the evening wore on, Jolin noted that it was getting late. Issei offered to accompany her but she declined, saying she would call a family taxi. Understanding, Issei decided to leave before it got any later. They exchanged farewells, promising to see each other in a month. Once Issei arrived home, he was greeted by Lucifer. He shared the details of his day, which prompted Lucifer to make light-hearted jokes, causing Issei to blush slightly. Feeling exhausted from the power he had exerted, Issei said goodbye to Lucifer and headed to bed, looking forward to his trip to the underworld the next day. The next morning, Issei woke up, reflecting on the previous day's adventures. He felt it had been quite a wild day, but he was ready for more challenges ahead. After packing for his journey to the underworld, he was about to leave when Lucifer greeted him. Issei returned the greeting and mentioned that he was indeed leaving. He expressed regret but reassured Lucifer that they would stay in touch and that he should be ready for any orders or unexpected events. With that, Issei made his way to the train station, opting to walk and enjoy the fresh air. Upon arriving, he found the Gremory and Citri groups waiting for him. He greeted everyone except a few specific individuals. Issei inquired about when the train would depart, only to learn from Sona that they would be taking different trains. Issei expressed his surprise at not having asked Sona about it. Saji, feeling bold, confronted Issei, questioning his right to speak to Sona that way. Issei simply stated that he was superior to everyone present. Angered, Saji called him a fool, but Sona quickly intervened, telling Saji to stop. She acknowledged the tension, noting that they couldn't seem to coexist without conflict. Issei interrupted, stating that he had not forgiven them and questioned whether they ever wanted him to live when he was nothing. Sona admitted that she lived with those regrets and was trying to earn his forgiveness. Issei dismissed her efforts as futile, pointing out Saji as an example. In a moment of anger, Saji lunged at Issei, unable to tolerate the insult to his president. Issei, however, remained calm and smiled as Saji charged at him, clearly intending to retaliate. Just then Izari, who had been watching, shouted for Issei to stop. But it was too late. Issei delivered a powerful punch to Saji's stomach, causing him to double over in pain and fall unconscious. Sona rushed to Saji's side, calling for help as her group gathered around him, concerned for their fallen comrade. Saji. Everyone was disturbed by the scene unfolding before them, yet they chose to remain silent. Issei, however, wore a wicked smile, one that hinted at his true feelings. The others wondered how far Issei would go to express his disdain for his family, Rias and Sona, but their thoughts were interrupted when Issei began to speak. He remarked that this was how one dealt with trash and suggested it was time to leave as the train drivers were waiting for them. Everyone nodded in agreement, except for Issei's family, who complied reluctantly. Once they boarded the train, it started moving. Issei settled at the back with his arms crossed, while Gasper sat beside him, beaming with joy at the opportunity to travel alongside his master. A few tried to strike up a conversation with Issei, but he ignored them, When he decided to head to the bathroom, he noticed Gasper had fallen asleep. Not wanting to wake him, Issei teleported to the train's corridor to finally use the restroom. Upon exiting, he was intercepted by Zenobia, who knocked him to the ground and leaned close to whisper in his ear. She had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Issei, maintaining a serious expression, asked what she thought she was doing. Zenobia explained that upon learning of God's death, her objective had completely changed. Curious, Issei inquired about her new goal. She revealed that she aimed to have children with the strongest being she knew. This surprised Issei slightly, and he responded that she would have to seek out the second strongest being instead. When she asked why, he simply stated that he had no interest in her and would not entertain her reasoning. Frustrated, Zenobia lowered her head, an aura of disappointment surrounding her. Issei, trying to lift her spirits, suggested that if she earned his recognition, there might be a small chance he would consider her request. This brought a smile to Zenobia's face, as she believed that gaining Issei's acknowledgement would lead to her goal. After this brief exchange, they returned to their seats. An hour later, everyone woke up to an announcement from the conductor that they were arriving. Excitement filled the air, but unfortunately, they were abruptly expelled from the train and landed in a nearly desolate area, where a massive dragon appeared and began to attack them. The group struggled against the relentless assaults of the dragon, except for Gasper, who seemed to be on par with the creature. The dragon regarded Gasper with interest and launched a powerful punch, which Gasper countered with a punch of his own. The impact created a shockwave. Gasper wore a somewhat eerie smile that unnerved the dragon, who realized Gasper was incredibly strong, even more so because he had yet to unleash his full power. The dragon decided to focus on Issei instead. Before the dragon could launch its first attack, it was distracted by a Nikomata who managed to position herself behind it. However, the dragon simply swatted her away with its tail, leaving her injured. Meanwhile, Akino fired a lightning bolt at the dragon, but to Rias and her group's dismay, it barely affected the beast. Ignoring everyone else, the dragon turned its full attention to Issei and delivered a devastating blow that Ryu could only watch in slow motion as it approached. The others wanted to intervene, but they felt powerless against such a formidable creature. Ryu took the full force of the attack and was sent flying, crashing into some rocks and losing consciousness. The Gremory group was worried about Ryu, who was bleeding profusely, but thanks to Asia, they managed to heal him, even though he remained unconscious. The great dragon stood before them once more, ready to attack again. Fortunately, Issei arrived at the scene and asked what was happening. Issei struggled to fall asleep for even 5 minutes because everything felt like a disaster. However, he understood that the task at hand was to defeat the dragon. Everyone was on edge, eager to find out who was stronger, Issei or someone from the most powerful warrior race. Almost everyone was invested in the outcome except for Gasper, who already knew who would win. Silence enveloped the area as the dragon locked eyes with Issei, who maintained a mocking and ruthless smile. The dragon's instincts screamed at him to distance himself from Issei, warning that it could be the last mistake he ever made. Yet, driven by pride, he was determined to fight. The battle commenced with the dragon launching a powerful tail swipe, which Issei dodged effortlessly while keeping his grin. The dragon followed up with a series of rapid slashes, but Issei remained unfazed, simply observing the onslaught. Growing bored, Issei seized the opportunity when the dragon threw a punch, climbing up its arm to deliver a tremendous blow that stretched the dragon's neck as it spat blood. Everyone watched in shock as Issei dominated the dragon that had previously cornered them. Almost everyone was astonished except for Ken, who felt a twinge of envy at Issei's overwhelming power. The dragon quickly regained its composure and aimed another tail swipe at Issei, who was still airborne. The attack was mere inches away from hitting him when, in an instant, Issei vanished and reappeared behind the dragon. Moments earlier, Issei had stopped time just before the attack could connect, using his stand to propel himself to the dragon's rear. Now, the dragon realized it was at Issei's mercy, and its instincts screamed for it to flee. Issei addressed the dragon, stating that it had caused him more trouble than he anticipated and that he could not forgive its audacity. He declared that it would cease to exist. With that, he summoned one of his stand's arms, which glowed white and shimmered with distortion. The dragon understood it was finished, but just before Issei's punch could land, he was suddenly grabbed by the shoulder and sent crashing to the ground. Confused, Issei could only ask what was happening. It was Azazel who had arrived to save the dragon, commenting that things had escalated too far. Everyone was perplexed by the situation, prompting the great dragon to speak up, asserting that he had everything under control. Azazel countered, reminding him that he had almost been killed. Their conversation was interrupted by Rias, who demanded to know what was going on. Azazel explained that this had all been planned to gauge their strengths and future training, as well as to show them how weak they were compared to other supernatural beings. The dragon added that if Issei hadn't been there, they would all be dead. He then pointed at Issei, asking for his name. Issei introduced himself as Issei Brando and complimented the dragon on the fight. The dragon responded that he hadn't had a battle like that in a long time and suggested they should do it again someday. Issei agreed wholeheartedly. The dragon continued, noting that the young one still had much to learn. Particularly Hyoudou Issei, who showed the least signs of strength despite wielding such power. Azazel acknowledged that they were already aware of that. Time passed, and everyone was briefed on what their month in the underworld would entail and their training guides for the future. Later that night, everyone was resting in the BGMI mansion, except for Issei, who was perched on a large rock, gazing at the moon and wishing his father could see it, knowing he would have loved it. It was time to confront those responsible for turning Issei's life into a mess. He hoped that wherever they were, they would see this. Issei finished his thought with a wicked smile and opened a portal to the entrance of the BGMI mansion. As the guards noticed Issei, they immediately reacted and charged at him, attempting to take him down. However, Issei merely glanced at them with a serious expression. The guards froze in fear at his gaze, but one mustered the courage to speak. The guard told Issei to stop immediately. Upon hearing this, Issei paused and turned to face him, asking if something was wrong. The guard explained that he couldn't just enter since it was private property. Issei responded casually, saying he was authorized to be there. The guard insisted that Issei needed to show evidence of this authorization. Issei acknowledged the request but then opened a portal, reached in and pulled out a person. The guards were taken aback and immediately knelt in unison, welcoming Zerzek home. Zerzek was surprised by his surroundings and realized that Issei was the one who had brought him there. He asked for an explanation. The guard explained that Issei had entered suddenly and they had asked him to identify himself, after which he pulled Zerzek from the portal. Issei chimed in, saying that who better to grant him access than the ruler of the underworld himself. Zerzek noted that it shouldn't have been a problem since they had given out invitation letters, which Issei admitted he had discarded earlier, not thinking they would be important once inside the underworld. The guards were visibly sweating at the scene unfolding before them. Zerzek mentioned that if that was the reason Issei called him, he would leave as he had paperwork to attend to. Issei interrupted, stating that there was another matter he needed to resolve with him and his family regarding Rias. Zerzek apologized, explaining that he couldn't address it at the moment due to his backlog of work. Issei expressed that he would have loved to help with the paperwork but felt it was no longer possible. Upon hearing the phrase "help with paperwork for a month," Zerzek's ears perked up, and his eyes sparkled as he responded that Issei was in luck since he was about to speak with his parents after dinner. Issei was pleased with this turn of events, and Zerzek suggested they start immediately. Issei assured him it would only take a moment. The guards, still present, couldn't help but sweat again as it was rare to see their leader in such a mood. Zerzek asked for a moment to prepare the magic circle. Issei dismissed the need for a magic circle, reminding Zerzek that he had brought him there using his own transportation methods. Issei opened a portal and walked through it, followed by Zerzek, who found himself in his office once they crossed over. Zerzek remarked on Issei's unconventional methods. Issei agreed, and Zerzek, adopting a serious expression, stated that they should get straight to the point. Issei appreciated this straightforward attitude but laid out the terms. They would first discuss the actions against Rias and her friend, Sona, reach an agreement, and finally share their viewpoints over dinner at the BGMI residence. Zerzek raised an eyebrow, curious about what Rias had done to prompt such an important proposal from Issei. Zerzek agreed but requested to know every detail of the events if they were to reach a satisfactory resolution. Issei began recounting his story, explaining how he had once been a happy child with a loving family, living a healthy and joyful life. However, he noted that all good things must come to an end. He shared the hardships he endured during his childhood, detailing the physical and psychological torment he faced, which shattered his innocent dreams of a happy family. Zerzek listened in shock, realizing the extent of Issei's suffering. He understood that Issei was not lying as he could sense the truth in his demeanor. It became clear to Zerzek that he owed Issei not only an apology but also his respect. Zerzek expressed his regret, stating that mere words of apology would not suffice for such matters. He formally apologized on behalf of himself and his demonic house for the disrespect and selfishness that represented the worst aspects of their kind. This apology brought a smile to Issei's face, as it was the acknowledgement he had long awaited. He remarked that Zerzek was not as bad or egocentric as he had expected for someone with the title of Mao. He was the opposite of what one would expect from demons. Zerzek thanked Issei but reminded him that they still needed to fulfill the other terms of their agreement, including the appropriate punishment for his sister and Sona, who had broken an important rule of their realm. He assured Issei that their punishment would not be severe. Issei acknowledged this but insisted that he would also impose charges against the Hyoudou siblings. Zerzek agreed that this would be the fairest approach. Before proceeding, Issei offered to help with the paperwork. Zerzek asked if he was sure about that. After all, there is paperwork here that could take a year to complete. Issei reassured Zerzek that it was no problem. Zerzek pointed to a mountain of papers, indicating that was everything he had pending at the moment. Issei approached the pile, touched it and smiled, confident that it would be manageable. The pile began to glow and after a few seconds it stopped, allowing Issei to step back. He suggested that Zerzek could check to ensure everything was in order or ask a secretary to review it, and then he could draw his conclusions based on whether it was useful or not. Zerzek nodded and confirmed that everything was indeed resolved as Issei had promised. He expressed his gratitude, saying that Issei had truly saved him. With that settled, they moved on to discuss the case of Rias Gremory and Sona Citri. Issei and Zerzek spent nearly the entire day talking and debating appropriate punishments for the crime against Issei. They put so much effort into the discussion that they ended up spending a couple of extra hours on the topic, ultimately reaching an agreement that benefited both parties. Meanwhile, Rias was walking through the halls of the Gremory mansion. It had been a long time since her last visit, and she greeted everyone she encountered, from the cooks to the maids. Although she felt excited to be home, she was also anxious about Issei's relationship with her family and how it would affect her stay. In her distraction, she accidentally bumped into someone and upon looking up, felt a wave of nerves wash over her as she realized she had collided with her father, Hyoudou Gremory. He asked if she was all right, noticing her unease. Rias managed to respond that she was fine, explaining that it was unusual to see him in that part of the mansion. Hyoudou then inquired about Issei, mentioning that he had seen all the guests except for him and was curious about when he would arrive. Rias felt a chill at the mention of Issei's name, worried that he might be late for such an important gathering. She replied that he might be a bit delayed but would likely arrive before dinner with her brother. Hyoudou expressed his eagerness to meet Issei, having heard that he was strong, even more so than the Security and the bearer of Tiamat. Rias then asked when dinner would be ready, to which Hyoudou replied it would be ready in 30 minutes. Rias was startled by the time, realizing she was anxious about Issei and her brother potentially missing dinner. Back with Issei, he was finishing up his conversation with Zerzek about daily life and other topics. Issei found talking to Zerzek surprisingly pleasant, never expecting to have such a good conversation with a Siscon. Zerzek then pointed out that they were running late for dinner, which startled Issei. He questioned whether it was really that serious, but Zerzek insisted that it was the last thing they could afford to be late for in that house. Without wasting any time, Issei opened a portal directly to the entrance of the Gremory mansion. Since he was accompanied by the Mao this time, they were not asked for identification upon entering. They were greeted by the maids of the mansion and made their way to the dining room, where everyone was gathered. As Issei and Zerzek entered the elegant dining room, a hush fell over the crowd. The trio of brown-haired individuals frowned at their arrival, which Issei noticed and responded to with a half-smile. Zerzek decided to break the silence by greeting everyone, and they returned his greeting. He encouraged Issei to introduce himself, and out of courtesy, Issei complied. He introduced himself as Issei Brando, acknowledging that they had likely heard of him before, and apologized for not introducing himself sooner. Venelana, the matriarch of the Gremory family, reassured him that it was no problem. She remarked that she had heard a lot about him and noted that he was quite handsome. However, the conversation was interrupted by Hyoudou, who seemed less than pleased with his wife's comment. He suggested that they should stop chatting so the food wouldn't get cold and hinted that perhaps Venelana should let the young man rest. Not everyone shared the same opinion, as everyone was aware of Issei's character and expected him to respond with one of his usual insults. They all lowered their heads, bracing for what might happen next. However, Issei surprised everyone with his response. He addressed Hyoudou Gremory, apologizing for forgetting him and expressing his honor at being in the presence of a war veteran. He mentioned a mutual friend who wanted to see Hyoudou again and recounted stories of their strength during the war. Those who knew Issei were taken aback by his respectful demeanor, while those unfamiliar with him might have thought he was a genuinely good person, which was quite the opposite of his true nature. Xiaticus enjoyed being the center of attention thanks to Issei's words and laughed heartily, playfully placing a finger under his nose. He invited Issei to sit beside him, which Issei accepted with enthusiasm. However, Zerzek, Xiaticus's son, questioned where he would sit. Xiaticus directed him to a spot next to Rias. Zerzek complied and took his seat, and the group continued their meal, discussing various topics. However, as the meal came to an end, no one stood up. Zerzek, in an unusually serious tone, instructed everyone to remain seated. Xiaticus inquired about the reason for this unusual command. Zerzek explained that there was an important matter they needed to discuss. Everyone was puzzled by the sudden shift in conversation. Zerzek revealed that approximately 10 years ago, a human boy lived in the same city where they had sent Rias to acclimate to her surroundings. Venelana, Rias's mother, asked how this related to their current situation. Zerzek explained that Rias had violated a sacred rule established since the time of Lucifer. This revelation shocked everyone present, especially those involved. Rias felt nervous, knowing her secret was about to be exposed. Ryu, Ken, and Izari were aware of the implications and exchanged worried glances with Issei, who met their gaze with a knowing smile that confirmed their fears. Rias could only whisper a plea for it not to be true, while Issei reveled in their anxiety. Zerzek continued, addressing his parents with a serious expression. He explained that he had difficulty believing the news when he first heard it, but as the leader of the underworld, he sought equality for all. If that meant punishing his own sister, he would do what was necessary. Xiaticus questioned which law Rias had broken as a child, finding it hard to comprehend. Zerzek clarified that Rias had physically and psychologically harmed a human. The room fell silent, with everyone except Rias's close friends shocked. Venelana, fearing for her daughter's actions, asked if it was true, tears welling in her eyes. Xiaticus echoed her concern, seeking reassurance from Rias. Overwhelmed, Rias lowered her gaze and reluctantly nodded, acknowledging her guilt. Seeing this, Xiaticus abruptly stood and shook Rias by the shoulders, expressing his disbelief and anger at her actions. Rias, feeling cornered, tried to defend herself but was cut off by a sharp slap from her mother, who expressed her disappointment. Asia, who had been silent, finally spoke up, asking what would happen to Rias. Xiaticus grimly noted that in some cases, such actions could lead to severe punishment. Before he could elaborate, Ryu, agitated by the situation, pressed for clarification. Xiaticus hesitated before revealing the harsh truth. The punishment could be death. This shocking revelation left everyone in disbelief, but Ken quickly interjected, refusing to accept such a fate for Rias. He argued that it had happened years ago and offered to take responsibility. Before he could continue, Zerzek interrupted, reminding him that both Rias and her brothers shared the blame. Zerzek spoke with a serious expression, reminding everyone of the fourth brother of their blood. This left Rias's parents more stunned than ever, but their main concern was their daughter in that moment. Zerzek explained that the Hyoudou family consisted of 4 brothers, a typical family until Rias arrived. She introduced them to sacred gears at a young age, which somehow broke the bond of love and understanding between the brothers and the fourth brother, turning them against him with dishonor and arrogance. Since the fourth brother could not awaken a sacred gear, he faced deception, reprimands, pain, and suffering day after day until he was presumed dead. However, the situation did not end there, as Zerzek revealed another member of the crime, the Citri heiress. As Zerzek finished speaking, Rias's parents were devastated by what awaited their beloved daughter and her friends, but Zerzek continued. He explained that they might wonder how a human could have such an impact on the demonic society. He elaborated that during the times of war, before and after Lucifer's reign, humans were allies of demons and angels, making it forbidden to attack an allied human, as it would be seen as an act of betrayal. This revelation increased the tears of the patriarchs, knowing their daughter's fate was sealed. Everyone else felt sorrow as they faced the possibility of losing their president and friends. Yet, Zerzek decided to intervene again, capturing everyone's attention when he stated that the accuser and victim had chosen to show mercy, a mercy that had never been shown to him. Xiaticus, confused, asked what Zerzek meant. Zerzek clarified that if the victim did not appear before the council, there would be no reason to punish them, and they would only need to speak with the victim. Venelana, eager for answers, asked where the victim was. Zerzek introduced them to Issei Brando, the victim. Everyone turned to look at Issei, who maintained a serious and composed demeanor. Rias's parents could hardly believe that all this time, they had been referring to Issei. Xiaticus, in disbelief, questioned if it could be true. Issei simply looked at him with an air of superiority and confirmed the truth. In response, Xiaticus knelt before Issei, pleading for forgiveness for Rias, stating that she did not know what she was doing. Issei stood up and told Xiaticus to rise, indicating that he would need to discuss this matter with Zerzek. Venelana looked to Zerzek, hoping that he would be lenient. Zerzek expressed regret but stated that the law was the law. However, he noted that Issei was such a good person that he decided not to impose a severe punishment, provided that everyone involved sincerely apologized. Zerzek's words brought immense relief to Rias's parents, as their daughter might be saved. However, some of the brothers disagreed. Ryu voiced his frustration, refusing to apologize to someone like Issei. This surprised nearly everyone present, but Issei responded calmly, stating that if they did not want to apologize it was fine. He then asked Zerzek to prepare the guillotine. Everyone was taken aback by Issei's sudden change in attitude. Ken exchanged glances with Izari, both knowing that Issei was capable of following through with his threat. Ken, feeling the pressure, apologized to Issei, acknowledging their stubbornness and asking for forgiveness on behalf of himself and his sister for Rias. Issei, recognizing their sincerity, decided to let it slide this time but warned that if they ever acted against him again, he would become a tyrant. Ken and his brothers felt a chill at Issei's tone. Ryu requested to speak with his brothers privately, and they agreed to step into another room. Once inside, Ryu expressed his anger at Ken for siding with Issei. Ken responded firmly, urging Ryu to mature and questioning if he was willing to sacrifice their lives and Rias's for a failed relationship. Ryu was at a loss for words and turned to Izari for support. However, Izari surprised him by stating that he was the one in the wrong, and his selfishness needed to be set aside. With that, Ken suggested they return as everyone was waiting outside. Back in the main room, Zerzek addressed the group, stating that he was ready to conclude the situation that had caused him so much stress. The moment everyone had been anticipating was finally at hand. Zerzek revealed that, after discussing with Issei, they had reached an agreement regarding the punishment. Days later, Issei found himself in a training field, delivering powerful strikes to a punching bag while practicing his movements. He noticed Azazel arriving with the rest of the group, who gathered everyone together to share some words. Azazel commended them on their progress over the past month, noting significant improvements in their statistics compared to before their training began. Azazel congratulated everyone, noting that some had trained harder than others, but all would be revealed on the battlefield. At that moment, Issei interrupted, expressing his understanding of the point being made, but questioned whether there was more to the speeches than just that. Azazel nodded in acknowledgement and continued, confirming that Issei was correct. The real reason for their gathering was to announce something significant. Just then, Zerzek arrived to complete the announcement, revealing that it was about the celebration for young demons. This news surprised and delighted the young attendees, who were eager for a break from their rigorous training. However, Zerzek was aware that not everyone knew about the event, so he explained further. The celebration was one of the most important in the demon world, as it brought together representatives and heirs from various demon houses, while also honoring the strongest among them. This revelation opened the eyes of those who were unaware of the significance of the celebration, including the Hyoudou brothers. Zerzek then excused himself, and Azazel turned to the audience with a question directed at Issei. He noted that Issei had not stopped smiling since the mention of the celebration. Issei acknowledged this, feeling that something interesting was about to happen, and he also mentioned the positive results of his training. Azazel asked if Issei could demonstrate his progress, to which Issei eagerly agreed. He pointed toward a mountain, took a few steps back, and then delivered a powerful strike that created a significant gust of wind. The audience was astonished by the sheer force of his attack. When the dust settled, they realized that the mountain had vanished entirely, leaving everyone in shock, as they doubted anyone present could achieve such a feat with mere physical strength. 1 hour later, Issei was seen alongside Xiaticus Gremory. Despite recent events, their bond had not weakened. If anything, it had grown stronger. They conversed comfortably, and Issei asked Xiaticus if soldiers in his time used any striking techniques. Xiaticus reminisced about the importance of hip rotation and momentum when delivering a punch, explaining how to adapt if an opponent dodged. Issei chuckled at Xiaticus's wisdom, but then his expression shifted to seriousness as he posed a more serious question about betrayal. Xiaticus fell silent, maintaining a serious demeanor. Issei smiled, having anticipated the response, and mentioned an old friend he had previously discussed. Xiaticus agreed to call Rias, and Issei requested that he also contact Zerzek. After a while Rias arrived, accompanied by two familiar figures Ryu and Ken. Issei welcomed Rias to sit beside him, but he expressed dissatisfaction at the presence of Ken and the other subordinate. Ken ignored the comment but Ryu took offense. He retorted that it was none of Issei's business and pointed out that Rias had come with them. Issei acknowledged Ryu's point but asked Rias if she agreed with the actions of her companions. Rias, with a serious expression, stated that regardless of their company, their actions were not appropriate. Issei smiled, while Ryu lowered his head in frustration. Seizing the opportunity to provoke Ryu further, Issei teased him about being infatuated with Rias, asserting that she was already his. Ryu's anger flared at Issei's comment, and he expressed his frustration, declaring that he had tried to tolerate Issei's behavior but felt it had crossed a line. In his fury, Ryu prepared to confront Issei, but Rias intervened, reminding him of the rules they needed to follow. Ryu realized the implications of the situation and calmed down. Rias reminded him that Issei often spoke just to provoke him, as it was typical behavior for Issei. This made Issei raise an eyebrow and respond, claiming that he only spoke. Issei then gestured for Rias to sit, and to Ryu's surprise she chose to sit on Issei's lap. This unexpected action left Ryu feeling confused and a bit jealous. Issei praised Rias for her choice, which made her blush as it was the first time she had ever sat on a boy's lap. However, the moment escalated when Issei playfully nibbled on Rias's ear, causing her to let out a small gasp. This only fueled Ryu's jealousy, prompting him to rush at Issei, shouting for him to leave Rias alone. Just as Ryu was about to reach Issei, Issei smiled and snapped his fingers. In an instant, Ryu found himself on the ground, subdued by Ken, who had intervened unexpectedly. Ryu was shocked that Ken had acted against him and demanded to be released, questioning Ken's loyalty. Ken explained that they needed to adapt to the rules if they wanted to survive and asked Ryu why he insisted on fighting against them. Ryu's expression softened with sadness, and he requested to be let go, the weight of Ken's words resonating in his mind. He stood up, head bowed in contemplation. At that moment, Xiaticus interrupted, stating that they had strayed from the topic. He had called Rias to borrow her meeting camera for Sona but noted that things had gotten out of hand. He dismissed everyone, promising to update Zerzek later and reminded them to prepare for the young demon's party. Issei chimed in, recalling that he wouldn't attend since he wasn't a demon and felt it wasn't his place. Xiaticus reassured him that he would ensure Issei could join without issues. With that, everyone left to get ready in their finest attire. Later that night, the underworld sky sparkled with lights reflecting from the party venue, where a crowd of distinguished guests gathered. Familiar and unfamiliar faces mingled, with some dancing, others enjoying punch and laughter filling the air. Our group arrived, except for two members each dressed impeccably. After about half an hour, the missing pair made their grand entrance, capturing everyone's attention. Gasper and Issei dazzled in their elegant outfits, with Issei adjusting Gasper's hair, making them look like a stylish duo. The rest of the occult club soon approached to compliment their outfits, exchanging praises. The party continued with lively entertainment, including amusing performances by a demon named Serorg, which Issei couldn't resist complimenting for his impressive physique. Serorg returned the compliment, and they engaged in conversation about training routines and anecdotes, establishing a friendly rapport. Feeling that something intriguing was about to happen, Issei stepped outside for some fresh air and sensed he was being watched. He called out, acknowledging the presence of someone hidden nearby. A hooded figure emerged from the shadows, and Issei expressed surprise at the unexpected visitor. When the figure removed their hood, Issei was taken aback to see Jolin standing before him. He questioned her presence, bewildered that she was there. Jolin, equally surprised, retorted that she could ask him the same question. Issei shook off his initial shock and began to converse with her, carefully choosing his words. He suspected that Jolin was analyzing the situation, as he had his own doubts about her being real. He asked her directly if she was truly Jolin, locking eyes with her. Jolin confirmed her identity and noted that his presence suggested that her journey was connected to this moment. Issei realized she was right and, after a moment of contemplation, expressed his surprise that she was linked to a certain group. Jolin's eyes widened in shock, questioning how Issei had come to that conclusion. Thoughts raced through her mind, wondering if Issei possessed some special ability that had given him a clue, though she dismissed the idea, knowing that only her grandfather had such a power. Hostility enveloped Jolin, and Issei sensed it. He responded with his typical confident smile, but Jolin was aware that Issei was studying her. She wasn't naive, so she decided to stop overthinking whether Issei's special ability involved mind reading. Taking a deep breath, she opened her eyes again and shot him an intimidating glare, expressing her frustration. She conveyed that Issei was being a significant annoyance at that moment and that she would have to find a way to silence him. Time resumed its course, and Rias was at her desk, accompanied by her entourage, discussing Issei with Sona and the rest of her group. Sona expressed her concern about Issei's newfound power, noting that he showed no mercy when it came to combat. Issei raised an eyebrow upon hearing this but chose to remain silent and listen to Rias's response. Rias acknowledged Sona's worries but explained that they couldn't take action since Issei was not aligned with any faction, as far as she understood. Suddenly, Gasper interrupted, stating that he had information that contradicted Rias's assumption. This left Rias puzzled, prompting her to ask what Gasper meant. Gasper revealed that his master had told him that if Issei were to join a faction, it would be the vampires. This revelation shocked everyone present, as they had never imagined Issei would ally with a faction outside the alliance. Rias, however, dismissed the idea, insisting it was impossible. She believed that if Issei were to challenge a high-ranking figure from the underworld, he would inform her brother, and she doubted Issei would dare to do such a thing. At that moment, Issei decided to reveal himself, laughing as he emerged from his hiding spot. He remarked that the idea of fearing Rias's brother was the funniest thing he had heard in years, urging Rias not to believe it herself. Everyone jumped in surprise at Issei's sudden appearance, except for Gasper, who had witnessed the event during the time freeze. A visibly shaken Sona asked Issei how long he had been there. Issei replied that he had been listening since they started discussing him and then greeted Gasper. They exchanged pleasantries, and Issei confidently stated that he did not fear Rias's brother or any of the other Maos, claiming he had someone of much higher rank on his side. Just as he was about to leave, he was stopped by his brother Ken, who asked how Issei had become so strong in such a short time. Issei, slightly taken aback, teased Ken about their recognition of his strength but decided not to reveal his secrets before heading home. 3 months passed, during which everyone had been training, some to surpass Issei and reclaim their pride, while others simply wanted to grow stronger. Issei found himself in class, bored as usual, while submitting an exam before the vacation break. His teacher reminded him that there would be no retakes for this exam, and Issei confidently claimed he would receive the highest score. The teacher suggested a review wouldn't hurt, but Issei insisted he was ready to leave. As he made his way home, Issei was intercepted by Azazel, who greeted him and informed him about a faction meeting. Azazel invited Issei to join, advising him to stay alert for updates from the Gremory group, as that would be the way to reach the underworld for the meeting. Issei agreed to attend. Suddenly, a stand appeared, surprising Issei. He was taken aback, questioning how there could be another stand user since he believed he was the only one. However, he quickly pushed those thoughts aside as he had to react and dodge an incoming attack from the stand aimed at his face. Confused but focused, Issei resolved to uncover the truth behind this situation later. Jolin, the stand's user, was astonished that Issei had managed to evade her attack. After all, only a stand user could see another stand. She chose to remain silent and observe the battle, hoping it would confirm her suspicions. Issei, noticing her surprise, commented on how full of surprises she was, playfully reminding her that they were friends. Jolin, however, dismissed his banter, stating that he posed a risk to her objective and that it was time for him to defend himself. Issei, undeterred, flashed one of his signature confident smiles, ready to engage in the fight. Issei acknowledged that, while he found the situation unnecessary, Jolin was right. Deep down, he was filled with questions and concluded that if Jolin was indeed a stand user, it would be best to play the fool and use the element of surprise. He noticed her astonishment when he dodged her attack. He recognized the danger of an unknown stand ability, as Dio had warned him about such things. Issei decided to keep studying her stand, as his curiosity prevented him from eliminating her right away. He remarked on the impressive nature of her magic, noting that most people would have moved even slightly to avoid a blow. Jolin felt a wave of relief wash over her, as she had feared he was another stand user. She expressed her relief, then began throwing punches at Issei with her stand stone free. Issei blocked some of the blows while allowing others to land, but he was caught off guard by the strength of her stand. One punch sent him crashing into a nearby tree, and he felt a bit annoyed at the dirt on his outfit. In a swift motion, he appeared behind Jolin, surprising her with his speed. He prepared to deliver a powerful strike, but Jolin managed to tilt her head just in time to avoid it. Issei complimented her evasiveness, acknowledging that not many could have dodged his attack so easily. Jolin playfully suggested that perhaps he was just not very good at throwing punches. Issei found her comment amusing and decided to move quickly again, this time positioning himself in front of her and launching another, stronger punch. However, Jolin was ready and shouted her stand's name. In that moment, a multitude of threads emerged, ensnaring Issei and leaving him trapped under Jolin's watchful gaze. She declared that it was over for him, expressing regret that he had chosen the side of demons, as they could have maintained their friendship. However, she was determined to eliminate any obstacle in her path to achieving her goal. As Jolin spoke, Issei analyzed her stand and began to understand its abilities. He noticed that as the threads tightened, parts of Jolin's body transformed into thin strands, which gave him a sense of her limits. After listening to her speech, Issei smiled broadly, ready to surprise her with his next words. He questioned who had said he was on the side of demons, leaving Jolin bewildered and unsure of his true allegiance. Suddenly her danger sense kicked in, and she became alert, realizing that if she didn't finish him off now, she would regret it. She resolved to end the confrontation. Apologizing, Jolin commanded her stand to finish him. The stand prepared to deliver a powerful punch, and Issei, still smiling, shouted back that she would have to wait. Then he activated his ability and everything around them froze. Issei looked at Jolin with a mix of mockery and curiosity, pondering how she could be involved in the supernatural without him noticing. He recognized her skill and sensed that she had held back against him. It was clear that Jolin had no intention of killing him after all. In that moment, Issei sensed other energies nearby. Recognizing who they were, he smiled and decided not to waste any more time. Even while time was frozen, he knocked Jolin out and carried her away as if she were a sack of potatoes. In a different scene, two Nikomatas and a descendant of Sun Wukong named Biko, along with Rias and Ryu, were present. Kaneko, the albino Nikomata, appeared distressed, feeling responsible for the conflict at hand. About 10 minutes earlier, Ryu, Rias, and Kaneko had been gathered in a party room when Kaneko suddenly went on high alert. Ryu noticed her change in demeanor and asked what was wrong, but before he could get an answer, Kaneko dashed out of the room, clearly troubled. Concerned, Ryu and Rias followed her into the forest. They found Kaneko confronted by another Nikomata, who was the opposite of her, tall, well-endowed, and with black fur. Rias looked at the newcomer with a mix of fear and hatred, while Ryu, confused, asked Rias who she was. Rias, still glaring at the other Nikomata, explained that she was Kaneko's sister. The sister introduced herself as Kuroka and acknowledged Ryu, who felt a surge of anger upon hearing her name. He glared at Kuroka, vowing that he would not forgive her for the pain she had caused Kaneko. Ryu, feeling agitated, charged directly at Kuroka, who awaited him with a smile. As he approached, he couldn't help but express his frustration. He exclaimed that Kuroka was infuriating. However, as he got closer, he was unexpectedly struck by a blow from none other than Biko. Kuroka thanked Biko for his timely intervention, blowing him a kiss in appreciation. Biko then turned his attention to Ryu, advising him to stop being so impulsive. Ryu, realizing the truth in Biko's words, admitted that his actions were foolish. He acknowledged that while he understood the advice, he couldn't just stand by when faced with someone who caused suffering to someone close to him. Biko smiled slightly at Ryu's admission, but it was Rias who spoke up next, noting that it was unusual to see them there and questioning their motives. Kuroka, with a mischievous grin, hinted at several reasons for their presence, but emphasized that the priority was to take Kaneko with her. This revelation shocked both Rias and Ryu, leaving them feeling indignant. Rias firmly stated that she would not allow Kuroka to take one of her pieces, especially under her care. Kuroka responded with a confident remark, suggesting that they would see about that. Ryu, filled with anger, interrupted, insisting that Kuroka had no right to take Kaneko and declared that if it meant saving her, he would take action himself. Fueled by emotion rather than reason, Ryu prepared to attack, but Kaneko stepped in to calm him down. She pleaded with Ryu to stop, expressing her desire to protect them and insisting that she could handle the situation herself. With a warm smile, she turned to walk towards Kuroka. Kuroka praised Kaneko for her decision, but Ryu felt a surge of desperation within him. He grappled with the feeling of having lost once again, questioning his own worth in critical moments. The weight of defeat pressed down on him, and he realized he couldn't afford to lose Kaneko, his dear friend, or let down his president. As Ryu's energy began to rise, it caught the attention of Biko, who sensed a change in him. Excited by Ryu's evolution, Biko brandished his staff, eager for a challenge. He declared that he hoped Ryu would entertain him in their battle. With a flourish, Biko struck the ground, prompting Rias and Ryu to dodge the attack. Rias retaliated by unleashing a destructive bolt towards Kuroka, who effortlessly deflected it while pulling Kaneko to safety. Meanwhile, Ryu struggled against Biko, unable to land a hit as Biko toyed with him. However, as Ryu's frustration grew, so did his strength. Biko, noticing this change, became even more exhilarated. Ryu began to land punches, and eventually he managed to connect a solid hit on Biko, feeling a sense of accomplishment despite knowing it wasn't enough. Just then, Drake made his presence known, informing Ryu that he had grown stronger and was now capable of achieving the balance breaker. This announcement filled Ryu with excitement, marking a significant milestone in his journey. Ryu had achieved his balance breaker, showcasing its full splendor with dragon wings, shining brightly in the night sky. In this state, Ryu was faster and more confident. With a burst of speed, he positioned himself in front of Kuroka, ready to threaten her with a fist. However, Kuroka had already conceded, acknowledging her defeat. Ryu now turned his attention to Biko. As he charged at Biko, Biko managed to outsmart him, moving beside Kuroka and suggesting they retreat. Biko mentioned that they should leave as he no longer sensed Ryu's energy. Kuroka agreed, expressing the need to find their companion and depart. Biko nodded, but before leaving he addressed Ryu, acknowledging his strength but cautioning him that he still had a long way to go to match someone of his caliber. He then stated he would go after his other companion and wished Ryu luck. Meanwhile, Kaneko, the albino Nikomata, sensed a familiar aroma and aura, feeling a wave of sadness wash over her as she anticipated the outcome of the impending conflict. She realized that the situation unfolding was due to her presence. While others were caught up in the excitement of battle, Kaneko froze when Biko mentioned going after his companion, as she did not want to encounter the one person she least expected to see. Issei made his presence known, teasingly asking if Biko was referring to his companion. As he locked eyes with Kuroka and Biko, he declared that he would spare them this time, having enjoyed the spectacle they provided. He noted that Kuroka, the Nikomata sister, was quite the actress. Issei then threw Jolan to Biko, but in an instant, he appeared behind Biko, whispering a warning about taking care of her, as she would be useful in the future. He added that if anything were to happen to her, they would all pay, but Biko would bear the brunt of it. Issei returned to his original position, receiving a nod from Biko. Kuroka remarked on Issei's good looks but noted his lack of manners, as he had not introduced himself. At that moment, Issei's gaze intensified, stirring a mix of feelings within Kuroka, from danger to an unexpected thrill. Biko quickly intervened, whisking Kuroka and Jolan away, knowing what Issei was capable of. Kuroka, still entranced by Issei, was reluctant to leave. Once the drama subsided, Issei complimented Ryu on reaching his balance breaker, acknowledging his progress. Rias had a million questions about what he had said to Biko and who the other person was, but Issei promised to answer when the time was right. They prepared to return to the gathering, where Kaneko thanked Issei for not harming her sister. Issei, confused, asked what kind of monster she thought he was. Kaneko realized her mistake, but Issei found it amusing. She also expressed gratitude to Ryu and Rias for their support, receiving smiles in return. The group outside returned to the meeting, surprised by the news that the Norse god Loki had interfered at the party but had been sealed in a pocket dimension. This revelation brought relief as the incident had not escalated further. Issei reflected on something Biko had mentioned, realizing the person who had disappeared was indeed Loki. Azazel, one of the leaders, approached Issei to inquire about what had happened. Issei provided some details but withheld much of the information. Other leaders noticed this exchange and asked for more, but the two leaders simply stated there was nothing significant to report, lacking enough information to elaborate. Odin, the leader of the Norse faction, acknowledged the seriousness of the situation, expressing concern over the measures they would need to take regarding Loki. Surzek responded that the seal on Loki would last at least a day, but given Loki's nature and power, it could be much shorter, perhaps just an hour or even less. Odin recognized the gravity of the predicament and emphasized the need for caution. Just then Rias entered the scene asking what they were discussing. Surzek explained the necessity of sending troops to contain Loki, which alarmed the listeners as they would be facing a god. However, a group of young warriors stepped forward, ready to take on the challenge. Odin acknowledged their determination but reminded them of the risks involved. Surzek reassured Odin that most of the group were seasoned warriors, aware that every battle could be their last. He also hinted that they had an ace up their sleeve, glancing at Issei. Issei smiled and nodded, signaling his willingness to join the fight, which motivated the others, instilling a sense of confidence. They quickly organized their formations, knowing they could not send more people than necessary. Issei, however, would not be contributing to the numbers. So it was that in the original story the same group was transported, but this time Ryu, Ken, and Izari would also join them. The list of those who went into battle included Se, Rias Gremory, Kino Himajima, Asia Argento, Kiba Yudo, Kaneko Tuju, Gaspar Vladi, Roswise, Grimjow Vladi, Irina Shido, Saji Genshru, Izari, Ken, Ryu. Upon crossing over and arriving, the first thing they noticed was Loki waiting for them, delivering his typical monologue. He expressed how predictable mortals were, claiming they thought they could hold him off until the heavy hitters arrived to confront him. He dismissed their attempts to band together as a false show of strength, declaring that he would not allow it. Most of the group felt a wave of fear and nervousness, unsure of what to say. However, Ken stepped forward, piquing Issei's curiosity, who merely raised an eyebrow. Ken asserted that Loki was mistaken, expressing his certainty that they would stop him as he summoned his sword. Loki, smiling, did not respond but instead extended his arm, unleashing bolts of energy that caused a massive explosion. As the dust settled, the group was horrified to find themselves facing the legendary children of Loki. With a dramatic flair, Loki announced that the show would begin. The battle commenced and everyone defended themselves as best as they could, following the original story's course up to a certain point. Everyone had managed to hold off the battle until that point, but they were beginning to tire and it was taking its toll. As they watched the monsters rise again and again, despair started to creep in. However, at that moment, a surprising thought crossed their minds. They had not seen Issei since the battle began. Ryu expressed his frustration, wondering where Issei was when he was needed the most, suspecting that he had fled. No one could believe that Issei would run away, but Loki overheard Ryu and approached him with a wicked grin, taunting him about their overconfidence in victory. He chuckled, which only irritated Ryu further. Suddenly, someone whispered behind Loki, questioning who had said they fled. Startled, Loki jumped forward to gain distance, confused about how Issei had appeared so suddenly. He dismissed it as a cheap trick, but when he turned around no one was there. Just then, Issei spoke again from behind him, asking if he was all right. Loki slowly turned to face Issei, only to be met with a swift punch to the face that sent him flying several meters, crashing against a rock and becoming momentarily stuck. Angrily, Loki pulled himself together and confronted Issei, who was smiling confidently. Loki accused Issei of being a coward for striking a deity, but he quickly regained his composure, adopting a fighting stance and declaring that it wouldn't happen again. Issei, equally confident and smiling, remarked that he had analyzed Loki and noted that he didn't seem to be skilled in hand-to-hand combat. He warned Loki not to let him get too close. Loki acknowledged that Issei had a point but insisted that he was underestimating a god. In an instant they charged at each other, and Loki executed a rapid move that caught Issei off guard, delivering a fierce kick that sent him flying backward. Issei quickly regained his footing and attempted to counter with a kick of his own, but Loki dodged it. Loki then threw a right hook that Issei narrowly avoided, lowering his center of gravity to deliver upward strikes to Loki. Loki staggered back and acknowledged Issei's skill, admitting that he was good but still not on his level. He then lunged at Issei, landing a strong blow to his face that left Issei momentarily stunned. Taking advantage of this, Loki unleashed a flurry of punches, but Issei struggled to respond effectively, retreating several steps as they exchanged blows. Everyone watched in anticipation as the fight unfolded, the pace quickening. Even Loki's children paused their own battles to witness the spectacle. The leaders observed through a crystal ball, with Odin expressing surprise at Issei's strength, realizing he might have a chance to win. However, he hesitated, leaving others curious about his thoughts. Odin then grimly stated that if this was all Issei had, he was doomed, as Loki had yet to reveal half of his power. This revelation shocked everyone, especially since Issei was the one trading blows with Loki. Surzek, however, smiled and reassured Odin that Issei wasn't giving it his all either. This caught Odin off guard and he returned his focus to the fight. Back in the midst of the battle, both Issei and Loki were exhilarated by the exchange. Issei was thrilled by the hits he took while Loki felt a rush of excitement. Surprisingly, a good fight could set aside the ego of anyone, even a god. Issei managed to unbalance Loki and landed a precise hit, which Loki absorbed but quickly retaliated, leaving both of them staggered. As they both stepped back to gather their strength, they prepared to deliver their best punches simultaneously. The impact sent them both reeling slightly, and Loki remarked on the surprising nature of a mortal standing up to a god in a fistfight. He admitted that Issei had impressed him, even if he found him bothersome. Issei responded that if this was all of Loki's power, it was embarrassing for him to call himself a god. This jab succeeded in irritating Loki, who clarified that while Issei fought well, he hadn't shown all his strength yet. With that, they both charged at each other, ready to unleash their best strikes, but their battle was abruptly interrupted by the looming threat of a giant hammer descending upon them. Recognizing the hammer, Loki erupted in fury, questioning if there was a conspiracy against him. He understood that if the hammer struck him, it would be the end. Issei, curious about Loki's sudden hesitation, asked if he didn't want to continue their fight. Loki explained that he was at a disadvantage because of the hammer. Issei, unfazed, grinned and declared that he saw no problem with the hammer. He then effortlessly picked it up and tossed it far away, leaving everyone shocked and terrified, including Loki, who couldn't help but smile at Issei's audacity. Loki thought to himself, wondering who this person was. While everyone was stunned, Izari signaled to his siblings, having predicted Issei's actions. Before the two could resume their battle, Ryu arrived and accused Issei of being clever, but he had news. He wasn't the only one with intelligence in the area. Behind Loki, a teleportation circle appeared, and Ken emerged with the hammer, leading everyone to believe the battle was won. However, Ryu glanced at Issei and felt a chill as Issei, with a wicked smile, warned him that he shouldn't have done that, pointing at Loki. Ryu watched in slow motion, realizing that instead of fear on the face of the Nordic god, he saw something entirely different. A smile? In that moment, Ryu could only scream for Ken to stop, but it was too late. Just as Ken was about to strike Loki with the hammer, something unexpected happened that left everyone frozen in shock. Ken had been bitten by Loki's son, and Izari was so stunned that she couldn't move, paralyzed by the scene unfolding before her. Ryu rushed to Ken's side, calling out his name desperately. He urged Ken to get up, insisting that he was strong and that nothing could take him down. Tears streamed down Ryu's face as he pleaded for his brother to rise. Loki observed the chaos with a mocking tone, commenting on the waste of potential when people meddle in affairs that do not concern them. Issei watched intently, anticipating Ryu to unleash a hidden power. However, as time passed without any surge of energy, disappointment washed over him. Meanwhile, Ryu was doing everything he could to revive Ken, but nothing seemed to work. Then he remembered that Issei had healing abilities and rushed to him in desperation. Ryu pleaded with Issei to help Ken, promising to do anything, even give his own life, if only he could perform one of his miracles. Issei looked at Ryu and Ken with disdain before breaking into a sinister smile. He refused to help, laughing mockingly as he taunted Ryu. He found amusement in Ryu's desperation, reveling in the sight of him begging for assistance. Issei relished the moment, declaring how entertaining it was to see Ryu grovel at his feet, seeking help from him, Issei, without any guarantee of success. These words echoed in Ryu's mind, leaving him powerless to respond. The weight of Issei's cruelty shattered Ryu, and everyone present could feel the impact. Loki, observing the scene, wondered about Issei's level of cruelty and why he wouldn't help. Were they not allies? Yet, the situation brought Loki a sense of twisted pleasure, and he joined in the maniacal laughter with Issei, both of them looking down at Ryu, who was left in despair. The story unfolded with a sense of anticipation, capturing the hearts of its readers. The characters faced challenges that tested their strength and resolve, each moment filled with tension and excitement. As they navigated through their trials, the bonds between them deepened, revealing the power of friendship and determination. The journey was fraught with danger, yet they pressed on, driven by their hopes and dreams. The narrative flowed seamlessly, drawing everyone into a world where courage and resilience shone brightly. The story was about a character who had returned after a long absence. The atmosphere was filled with a mix of anticipation and uncertainty as friends and foes alike awaited this moment. The character's presence stirred emotions, memories flooding back, both joyful and painful. As the character stepped forward, the tension in the air was palpable. They had faced many challenges during their time away, each experience shaping them into someone stronger and more determined. The journey had not been easy, but The lessons learned were invaluable. With a newfound resolve, the character looked around, taking in the familiar faces and the changes that had occurred in their absence. It was clear that time had moved on, but the bonds they had forged remained strong. The character was ready to confront the past and embrace the future, knowing that every step taken would lead to new adventures and growth. The reunion was bittersweet, filled with unspoken words and shared glances that conveyed more than any conversation could. The character felt a sense of belonging, a reminder that no matter how far they had traveled, home was always a place in their heart. As they prepared to move forward, the character knew that the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but they were no longer alone. With determination in their heart, they stepped into the next chapter of their story, ready to face whatever awaited them.